Chapter 1428. The unusually nimble flying snakes had already rushed to the deck. The flying snakes, who had already received the order, retracted their long wings and began to destroy the destroyer's propellers without a care. Unlike the thick deck, the propellers were still a fragile existence even with protective grills. A flying snake that had already been hit by multiple cannons chose to perish together with the enemy. Its entire body crashed into the propellers, and blood and flesh splattered everywhere. However, the snake's unique toughness also wrapped around the propellers, and the high-speed rotation of the propellers stopped. In the blink of an eye, the entire destroyer lost its balance and kept tumbling, falling from mid-air into the distant hills. Most of the soldiers who were flung out of the destroyer did not meet the happy end of falling to their deaths. Before they could fall to the ground, they had already been intercepted and killed by the flying snakes in mid-air. Under the sharp mouths of the snakes, only broken limbs and flesh could fall to the ground. On the other side, after a few seconds, a bright ball of fire rose in the direction where the spaceship had fallen. "Shrink the formation," Bu Lang nervously commanded on the Black Pearl. He had to constantly adjust the position of each battleship on the 3D map according to the situation of the battleships. The situation was still not optimistic. In the sky were countless flying snakes, and on the ground was a surging sea race army. The entire Twin Tower stronghold was like a small boat in a tsunami, about to capsize and sink at any time. Bu Lang cast his gaze to the east. At the far end of the horizon was the Dark Portal, which was also the only way for the expeditionary army to return home. "Duque, you have to make a decision." In Karazhan, Duque looked at the battle situation in the magic mirror and suddenly sighed. The twin emperors were indeed suppressing Vasqi. In the elemental domain they had the advantage. What was worse was that this was not an overwhelming advantage. The demon emperor desperately urged the ice elements to freeze the surroundings, preventing the land battle from turning into an underwater battle. Vasht continued to wreak havoc, using lightning strikes or summoning large underlings to break the ice wall with brute force. In close combat, the Sword Emperor had no choice but to maintain his distance from Vasht. Once the distance was too close, the Sword Emperor would be beaten up by Vasht's high agility and speed. Alas! Following Duque's sigh, the battle on Serpentine Temple's throne platform came to an abrupt end. Because a variable had appeared. Sigh. Vasht also sighed inwardly. This kind of opportunity to train with a suitable opponent was too rare. In this life, perhaps because someone had returned to the ancient war to stir up trouble, the trajectory of Vasht's life had changed subtly. First, before joining Illidan, he would follow Archimonde. Of course, in the eyes of the arrogant Arkharans, the Naga clan was just like a barge or a ferry. Archimonde, who had destroyed thousands of planets, simply looked down on Vasht. Not only did he work for free by following that damn Ak, he even reaped a lot of benefits. After all, he had lost a large number of his men when he landed in Azhara. Then, when Nazul raised the flag of rebellion against the Burning Legion, Vasht, who had already barely joined the Legion as a vassal, was directly sent by Kil Jaden to follow Illidan. Then came another defeat. Illidan was outshot by Arthas in 20 shots. Vasht had no choice but to follow Illidan to the Outland dejectedly. But in this life, Duque gave Kael that's a hand. Instead of being corrupted, he became the savior of the Draenei. As a result, among Illidan's direct subordinates, Vasht could be considered to be the most powerful. Almost all the spoils of war in the siege would be given to her. Coincidentally, Vasht actually leveled up. Although she was only a demigod who strengthened her body and broke through her limits. After suffering for 10,000 years, she finally found a path of power, so Vasht naturally cherished it. Soon, she could not see the path ahead. On the path of leveling up, Illidan would not help her at all. In the past few years, she had been one-sidedly beating the Draenei and could not find an opponent of the same level. Even if she imitated him, she could not find an opponent. Illidan's path of dark energy was not something she could learn. Dark energy was refined by harvesting lives and souls. Everyone was harvesting. Illidan, the boss, ate the meat, and she, Vasht, could only drink the soup. The more powerful the power, the less it would be her turn. She could not improve herself by simply plundering, so what else could she do? On the path of power, she was completely lost. Now it was different. The Kiraj twin emperors were her best touchstone. She could vaguely see another path in the other party. This path had absolutely nothing to do with their previous master, Si Thun. During the fight, she could only feel that she had to cooperate with something and form a resonance with it. Only by absorbing that thing could she make a stronger power take root in her body. It was a very mysterious feeling. Originally, Vashj wanted to experience more in the battle. Unfortunately, at this moment, the twin emperors suddenly retreated and stopped without warning. Vashj had to interrupt her journey of enlightenment and focus on dealing with the upcoming battle that could start again at any time. The twin emperors stood with their hands by their sides. Vashj looked up at them, knowing that this pair of brother emperors represented the will of the weave demigod Duke Marcus, and that demigod had obviously been watching everything that was happening here from somewhere. They stopped and did not speak, which meant the main character had appeared. Sure enough, after a moment, the illusory elemental radiance extended out from the weave. When the bright light condensed together and formed a human figure in mid-air, a calm voice descended on the high platform of the Kolaifong throne. Vashj suddenly had a sense of trance. She seemed to have heard the voice that lingered in the minds of every ancient Naga like a ghost. It was a terrifying voice that was absolutely unforgettable, a voice that ended the dream of the High Elves' power, and even dealt a heavy blow to the invincible god Sargeras in their hearts. "Have we met before?" It was a very comical and funny sentence. If it had been before someone transmigrated, this would have been a terrible pickup line. But Vashj did not underestimate this sentence, or the person who said it. Looking at Mark Dooku's face, she put away the weapons in each of her hands into her storage space bag. Her 6 hands crossed at the same time, and she bowed deeply. No Naga who has experienced the ancient war will forget your face, your voice, and your power waves. The great demon Terminator, the destroyer of the void, the former high-level void lord of the infernal realm. Lord Mark Dooku. Suddenly being flattered, Dooku was a little embarrassed, but he still asked directly, "Do you know a maid called Serenia Eubateria?" Chapter 1429. Dooku had never imagined that he could see such a wonderful and complicated expression on the face of a female antagonist. At first, it might have been a pleasant surprise. He could clearly see Vashj's pupils contract instantly, and the sound of her inhaling could be clearly heard from 10 meters away. But it was followed by trembling. Dooku's system elf prompted that the surface temperature of Vashj's skin was rising, and Dooku saw that she was clenching her teeth. This could not be a good thing. If things continued like this, there would probably be no other ending than hacking Vashj to death. In the next moment, Vashj's entire body relaxed, and her excited eyes returned to calm in an extremely short time. Her gaze became unfocused, and filled with a sense of distance. Her unfocused pupils seemed to have traversed through time and space, seeing the past, seeing the glory of the High Elves 10,000 years ago. But in the end, she laughed. Ha ha ha. Clear and seductive laughter echoed throughout the entire Kolaifong throne, and even a small half of the Serpentine Temple. She actually, in a short 2 or 3 seconds, she acted out all sorts of emotions. Vashj, Dooku tilted his head and did not speak. His face showed an expression that said, "What are you laughing at?" Vashj's 6 arms hung down, and her expression and posture were all sorts of unnatural. It was a feeling that made her feel at a loss. Do you know? In the past 10,000 years, I have imagined what it would be like to reunite with you countless times. My dear master. Mark Dooku, no Duke Marcus. As soon as she said this, everyone was shocked. First, the twin emperors' expressions turned cold, and then became very strange. Did Vashj just call Marcus master? Then what the hell were we fighting so hard for just now? Then it was in Karazhan. At this moment, all the queens, high priestesses, and female generals of the Azeroth continent were there. Like Alucia, Servanas, Kalia, and the like, they were purely onlookers. Aurelia, on the other hand, face-bombed. Dooku. From calm to astonishment, and then to a high-pitched voice, Jaina was excited, just as Dooku had expected. Vashj was the enemy who killed Jimmy's brother. She had suddenly become Dooku's subordinate, and it seemed that their relationship was not shallow. What the hell was this? The next second, Gianna found herself suddenly being hugged. That feeling that was as gentle as water, that power that soothed the soul, in the entire Imperial harem, only one person had this kind of power. Tyrant. Calm down, Gianna. I know who she is. Believe me, Dooku has never touched her. That was a very faint but inconceivable fate between master and servant. Tyrant spoke 4 to 5 words in a second, like a machine gun, which immediately calmed Jaina down. If Tyrant had explained slower, there might have been even more misunderstandings. Fortunately, Duke had sought out Tyrant before the crack appeared, just in case. Duque turned back and smiled bitterly at Jaina. 10,000 years is too long. I wasn't even sure of Tyrant's feelings at that time, let alone taking care of a mere servant in name. Is that so? Jaina's voice was almost a whisper. Don't worry, I will not forget your second brother's death. Even if she is really my servant, I will give you a satisfactory explanation. Duque walked over and hugged Jaina lightly. He slowly stroked her back, and could clearly feel that her body had calmed down. His divine telekinesis once again appeared on Mark Dooku's face. The situation was just as interesting. Wearing Mark Dooku's outer shell, Duque sighed. It really is you, Saga. I really didn't know that you were Vashj. I should have thought that Queen Azhara had thousands of servants. What a coincidence. Hee. There are many unexpected things. I never thought that the god's emissary sent by the great Sargeras, who was worshipped by the entire High Elves, would be the greatest traitor in the history of the Burning Legion. I also never thought that the human hero who destroyed the Twisting Void Fortress and humiliated the army for 10,000 years, Mark Dooku, was actually the Alliance commander Duke Marcus from 10,000 years in the future using Nosdormu's power. Clap, clap, pa. Vashj applauded with her middle arm. Wonderful. This is too wonderful. Sure enough, compared to such a great undertaking that will shock the entire universe, the fate of a little maid like me, who was once half-hearted and turned to my new master and secretly stole information from my old master, is certainly not worth mentioning. It was clearly a compliment, but anyone could hear the bitterness in Vashj's voice. Vashj. Duque didn't know what to say. This was an extreme contradiction. Duque was a nostalgic person. Although he didn't have any psychological burden for giving up on Saga at that time, after all, Saga had chosen to inform Queen Azhara, he still couldn't bear to see her become like this 10,000 years later. Duque's words were suddenly interrupted by Vashj. I'm not Vashj. The servant with this title died the moment her master, Queen Azhara, gave her away as a gift. I'm Saga. Saga Ubatilia. An elven servant who was punished and exiled because she betrayed her new master. Then, something that no one could have imagined happened. Vashj raised her 6 arms at the same time, palms facing the sky, and a green brilliance began to linger around her body. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Vashj's body shape rapidly changed. The 2 pairs of arms above and below disappeared, and the snake hair that was dancing in the air was also gone. The long snake tail was shortening at a high speed. When the green brilliance disappeared, what appeared in everyone's eyes was a different kind of night elf. She had a head of red shoulder-length hair and fair skin, completely lacking the pale purple skin of the night elves. Under the chest protector that looked like white wings, there was an X-shaped dress formed by intersecting white ribbons, which just happened to lightly cover the sexy navel. The lower part of her body was similar to a Greek-style floor-length dress that Duque wore before he transmigrated. Even without the high slit on the side, the faintly discernible dress still made her long legs look exquisite and alluring. Vashj slowly walked in front of Mark Dooku, kneeled on the ground, and bowed deeply. Master, you said before, not every existence is qualified to stand by your side. Back then, you had the determination to endure 10,000 years of pain and torture to enter the Burning Legion as a spy. If I also have this courage and perseverance, when we meet again, you will accept me as your handmaiden. Chapter 1430. Vashj continued to speak tirelessly. 10,000 years have passed. Although I used the ultimate transformation that you taught me to deceive my former compatriots, I have indeed suffered unimaginable hardships, and more or less atoned for my sin of betraying you. Now I, Vasilika Ubatilia, once again beg you, great master, to let me return and become your maid. These sincere words moved the women of Karazhan. 10,000 years of suffering. Everyone thought that the High Elves deserved it. They betrayed their compatriots, and finally fell into the deep sea because of the judgment of fate. In order to survive, they did not hesitate to sell their souls to Enzos. As a result, their beauty was lost forever, and they became dirty and ugly Naga, wandering in the dark and lightless deep sea, with the most disgusting underwater creatures. However, the ultimate transformation deceived Enzos, and also became the last hope and redemption in Vashj's heart. After 10,000 years, she actually recognized Duque like Tyrant. Was this considered as going through thousands of twists and turns, and finally achieving the right result? At the top of Karazhan, The women were silent. It was too cruel to use 10,000 years to test a relationship. It did not matter if it was the relationship between a man and a woman, or the relationship between a master and a servant. No one dared to say that after being separated from each other for more than 6 million days and nights, they could still maintain their original hearts. Not to mention staying in such a dark underwater world filled with negative emotions such as resentment and madness. Only Jaina lowered her head slightly. No one knew what kind of complicated emotion she was feeling under her delicate face, which was constantly changing between a gloomy and a wavering expression. On the throne of the Serpent Shrine, Xueqi also sighed. Very impressive loyalty. I do not know what this 10,000 years of fate has brought you, nor can I feel the hardships you have experienced. Since it was a promise I made back then, and you have sincerely pledged yourself to me, I can't think of a reason to refuse. After saying that, Xueqi, who had the appearance of Mark Dooku, gently opened his arms, revealing a faint smile. Welcome, Vasilika. One sentence determined the whole matter. The twin emperors, who stood next to him, had a gloomy and unclear light in their yellow eyes. It would be a lie to say that they were not angry. If they could defeat Vashj more cleanly, even if Vashj returned to Xueqi's embrace, they would still be meritorious. Now that they were neither up nor down, and they still couldn't take down the two of them, the situation had changed. They had become Vashj's touchstone. It was too late to regret now. If they were given another chance, they would choose a more aggressive fighting style. Vashj, who had completely transformed into a night elf, straightened her back, a look of devotion and fanaticism beyond imagination on her face. 10,000 years ago, I had a chance for redemption. But I chose to curry favor with my former master, Queen Azhara. It was my stupidity that caused my 10,000 years of suffering. However, whenever I saw the hideous appearance of my compatriots and compared it to my beautiful body after I cancelled the ultimate transformation spell, I always felt comforted. My lord, this is the beacon of hope that keeps me from falling into madness. Vashj knelt down again. This time, she used her trembling hands to gently hold both sides of Xueqi's right boot. The dignified master of Kolaifeng, who controlled the water source of millions of creatures in the Outland, and could even easily change the situation in the entire Outland, Naga Queen Vashj, in the most humble posture in front of Xueqi, told her loyal prayers. Praise you, my lord. Praise you, great Master Duke Marcus. After saying that, Vashj kissed Xueqi's shoe heavily. To be honest, Xueqi could not get used to this exaggerated salute no matter how many times he did it. Although the Nagas had dispersed and become clan-based, the customs that had been passed down from the High Elf period had not changed at all. Power, status, and class were all very solidified. Seeing Vashj's insistence, Xueqi also accepted this big salute. The master and servant status was set. Xueqi said, "The farce outside can end now. Every moment, there are more unnecessary sacrifices happening. Master, if I had stayed in Illidan's camp..." "Damn, are you addicted to playing infernal affairs like me?" he cursed in his heart. On the surface, Xueqi was the man who claimed to be the Radiant King. Xueqi's expression became serious. "I am a demigod who spies on fate. I am the flag-bearer who overthrew the tyranny of the Burning Legion. Wandering for 10,000 years is enough. A mere Illidan is not worth it for my maid to risk her life again." After the huckster said these words, the fanaticism on Vashj's face became even more intense. "Thank you, my lord, for your understanding. However, this relationship from 10,000 years ago should be kept a little secret." Xueqi's expression was mysterious. Strictly speaking, the name Mark Dooku was not on the Burning Legion's must-kill list. This was because when he had publicly destroyed the Twisted Void Fortress, Xueqi had used the name Infernal Affairs. Mark Dooku was just a temporary alias Xueqi used in Azhara. Back then, there were 3 demon leaders in charge of Azhara, Magtheridon and the Eridar Gemini. The Eridar Gemini were already Xueqi's insiders. Magtheridon had just been killed by Varian, and it would take time for him to resurrect. It would not be a problem for a while. As long as Xueqi did not jump out and claim that he was the Infernal Affairs, the Burning Legion had no reason to immediately call their main force over. In fact, Xueqi did not believe that Kil'jaeden did not know that he was causing trouble in the Outland. According to Kil'jaeden's personality, after blowing up the Twisted Void back then, it was impossible that Kil'jaeden did not turn all the information and clues upside down. It was very likely that the fact that the Infernal Affairs was Mark Dooku had long been exposed. The key was that Kill Jaden was pretending to be stupid. What was he pretending for? If Duque was not a transmigrator, he really did not know what Kill Jaden would do next. What was shameless was that Duque was the kind of transmigrator who used history and future to the extreme. Since the commander of the Burning Legion was pretending to be stupid, Duque would also pretend to be stupid. When the time came, he would see who was the real idiot. Duque had calculated that as long as his main body did not run to the outland, Kill Jaden would definitely continue to pretend that he did not see him. In this case, what he had to do next was very natural. After a few seconds, two voices suddenly sounded on the originally extremely intense battlefield of the ruins of the Twin Towers. One was Vasht's clear and mysterious ancient High Elven language. I, Queen Vasht, hereby declare that I have lost the battle just now. It is the duty of the weak to obey the strong. I choose to pledge allegiance to the great demigod of Azeroth, Duke Marcus. My people, my servants, I now order you to put down your weapons and surrender to the Alliance. Otherwise, go to hell. Vasht's declaration caused a trace of shock to flash in the eyes of all the Nagas. Chapter 1431. The other was the voice of Bu Lang Bronzebeard. He spoke in the common human language, informed the entire Alliance and Horde army. In the battle at the Serpent Shrine, the Alliance commander Duke Marcus's Karaji twin emperors have successfully defeated the Naga queen, Vasht. Now Vasht has surrendered on behalf of all Naga. Take note. Do not attack enemies who have laid down their weapons, but for those who resist, kill without mercy. Compared to the Naga side, who were at a loss, the Horde's reaction was even more startled. Orgrim's expression was very interesting. At this moment, it was as if all the condiments and sauces in the kitchen had been smashed in his face. Almost at the moment the declaration was made, he realized that the gap between the Horde and the Alliance's combat power had once again been forcibly widened. As the old chief who had personally commanded the cruelest second battle of the Dark Portal, Orgrim knew best what a powerful navy could do. He still remembered those brave warriors who had grown up with him and fought on the front lines with him. They did not die on the bloody battlefield, but drowned helplessly in the water. His companions who were lucky enough to escape did not even have the chance to pull out the fangs of these warriors according to tradition and bring them to their wives and children. The Alliance used the Horde's unfamiliar water battle to shatter the Horde's dream of dominating Azeroth. One had to know that that year, the Alliance still used worn-out sailboats that they did not even bother to look at today. They commanded a group of mediocre Naga and the weakest Murlocs. Could the Naga of the Angry Scales compare to these powerful Naga who were on par with the Horde's elites on land? Sal patted Orgrim's shoulder and shook his head with a smile. The Alliance gained, we didn't lose either. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, then laughed heartily. I was thinking too much. The Draenor expedition this time seemed more like a feast to expand the army and recruit subordinates. The Alliance received the Draeni Eye and a large group of elite Naga, greatly increasing their strength. The Horde was not bad either. Regardless of what those fell orcs would do after regaining their sanity, the biggest obstacle, Zangarmarsh, had been cleared. The Horde did not need to fight the undead and crowmen to the death in the Auchenton area. They could completely cross the mainland of Zangarmarsh and directly enter Nagran to find their ancestors. Not only that, Orgrim whispered, there are many ogres and golems in Blade's Edge. Once upon a time, Orgrim had an ogre personal guard. It was an assault force that was extremely terrifying even today. The ogres' strong bodies allowed them to wear the thickest armor effortlessly. They were living tanks in human form. In the Battle of the Scorching Canyon, this 100-man guard was killed and wounded. They were killed by the Alliance's most powerful artillery and the Paladins of the Silver Hand. When they died, they dragged 30 times their number of Alliance soldiers down with them. As long as the ogres were armed and placed in a place where cannons and other heavy weapons couldn't reach them, they would still be a terrifying existence on the battlefield. Not to mention Golem, the most powerful killing machine in our world since ancient times. Thinking of this, the two generations of great tribal chiefs felt a little excited. The Alliance ate the meat while the tribe drank the soup. At the very least, the tribe didn't get nothing. Vasht led the entire army to surrender to the Alliance, and this had a huge impact on the Alliance. Whether it was on a tactical or strategic level, it had earth-shattering significance. The entire supply line of the Alliance was opened. Because the Kolaifong Reservoir no longer crazily drew water from the Hellfire Peninsula, the barrenness and water shortage of the Hellfire Peninsula was greatly alleviated. In time, it could even fill the entire sunken path of glory with water, forming a canal. The transport capacity of river transport was many times greater than that of land transport, and it saved even more fuel. The tribe directly split into two groups, with Orgrim leading the main force into Blade's Edge. Although it was said that they were going to wipe out the remaining fell orcs, it was actually to recruit strong men. Sar led a division of 5,000 people and ran to Nagran to acknowledge his ancestors. If there were no accidents, he would receive the shaman's inheritance and become the original shaman in history who was an elemental and enhancement shaman. While the tribe was busy recruiting strong men, the alliance couldn't be idle either. Without the suppression of the tribe's main force, the undead and crowmen in the Auchinton area rebelled. At the most exaggerated point, they even killed their way to the outskirts of Shotrath City. Left with no choice, William could only lead the army and wipe out the crowmen first. On the other hand, to allow the alliance's main force to wipe out the crowmen with more peace of mind, Xueqi, who was freed up, led the mechanized army into Moon Shadow Valley. They built a city in the middle of Moon Shadow Valley, less than 300 kilometers away from Illidan's lair, the Black Temple. Because the dwarves were the main force and they had to use a large number of air forces, it was naturally called the Wildhammer Fortress. On the surface, Mark Dooku brought a reel with him, strolling around and looking around, as if he had nothing to do all day and was blindly giving orders. In reality, Xueqi had been secretly busy consolidating the forces under Vashj. Vashj had been the Coliphon queen for so long, and she had accumulated a lot of power. Most of the aquatic monsters and leaders chose to obey. Only the swamp giants were not smart, or the dark energy they had been injected previously made them more violent. They were the most incisive rebels. In addition, there was also Leotheras the Blind. In this life, he wasn't as crazy as he was in history, but instead became Illidan's loyal follower. Originally, Xueqi wanted to control him, but in the end, this guy was stubbornly resisting, so he could only let him die. After consolidating Vashj's forces and letting Vashj's loyal Deepwater Lord Carathilas take control of the army, Xueqi let Vashj pass through the dark portal and come to Karazhan. "Dear master, where are you taking me?" Vashj, who was completely in human form, followed Xueqi through one hall after another, and finally came to a vast balcony. This was where the Night Bane used to be, and Xueqi had also resisted the invasion of Nazul, who was still the great chieftain. Now, this was just a window to the outside world of Karazhan. 10 steps away from Vashj, Xueqi stood still with his hands behind his back. The atmosphere in the air seemed to have quietened down because of what was about to happen next. The surroundings were silent, and only the soft moonlight shone on Xueqi's body. "Seleka, do you know? Everyone has to be responsible for what they have done." Xueqi seemed to say these words without rhyme or reason. "Master, did Seleka do something wrong?" Vashj lowered her head, and there was a sense of grievance in her voice. "Well, you did do something wrong. Do you remember that you once led an army to attack Kul Tiras and killed Crown Prince Tandrid's family?" Xueqi's words suddenly made Vashj's face turn whiter than white paper, and there was not a trace of blood on her pale face. Chapter 1432. I. Even the quick-witted Vashj could not say anything in this situation. No matter what she said, it was a fact that joining the Burning Legion had destroyed the entire Kul Tiras. The most terrible thing was that Jaina Proudmoore was one of Xueqi's divine daughters. Xueqi seemed to be talking about something that had nothing to do with her. "I value Jaina very much. She is one of the few mortals who has the opportunity to become a demigod. Once I become a true god, she will be my follower." At this moment, Vashj's whole body was shaking like a sieve. Since Jaina had a grudge against her, then the best way to solve the grudge was, of course, to sacrifice her, the little maid. Was there a need to say it? At this moment, Vashj really felt extremely bitter. She did not surrender on impulse. She had carefully studied Xueqi's actions. The Alliance and the Horde had fought for so many years and had a blood feud with each other, but in order to fight against the Scourge Army and the Burning Legion, they joined forces. The Horde took in the Forgotten, who were regarded as taboo by the Alliance. The Alliance maintained silence and calmly accepted this fact. The Karaji insect people swept through half of the Kalimdor continent. The Alliance took in the Karaji insect people, and the Horde did not even let out a fart. Who knew that when she took all the Nagas to join Xueqi, Xueqi would actually say that he wanted to settle the score? For a moment, Vashj was really full of grief and indignation. What was the difference between this and being attacked by a dog? But she had no choice but to surrender at that time. Xueqi was already ready to take action himself. Even if Xueqi did not take action, her useless subordinates could not take down the Twin Tower Fortress, and if she continued to resist, she would definitely die at the hands of the Twin Emperors first. At this moment, Vashti broke down. For a moment, countless negative thoughts filled Vashti's mind. If she stubbornly resisted to the end, maybe she would not have to suffer such a humiliating defeat? Maybe her subordinates could succeed? Or maybe Illidan would be merciful and come to help her. Her mind was full of messy thoughts. More than one impulse emerged, urging her to make a last stand. But in the end, the only thing that came out of those squirming red lips was a humiliating plea. Master Duke, do you really want your Celia to die? Xueqi turned his head and looked at the sky, bathing his face in the moonlight. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. Merit must be rewarded, mistakes must be investigated, and enmity must be avenged. This has always been my principle. As a leader, if the rewards and punishments were unclear, the people around him would naturally be divided. If you can't even lead the people around you, you can forget about leading the entire alliance, or even the entire Azeroth. Vashti didn't say anything. She knelt down and slowly stretched out her trembling hands to grab the corner of Xueqi's clothes. Xueqi did not dare to turn back to look at that beautiful face that was filled with despair and sorrow. He was afraid that his heart would soften. In the end, he did not turn back. Merit will be rewarded, and mistakes will be investigated. I've given you a chance. It's up to you to see if you can grasp it. With that, Xueqi suddenly pulled back his robe and disappeared in front of Vashti in a flash. Master! Vashti hugged him fiercely, but what she hugged was only nothingness. Her whole body froze. After a few seconds, she came back to her senses and suddenly laughed wildly. Ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! My good master, your so-called chance is to let me die in the hands of your woman and let her vent her anger? Ha 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 ha! Great! You are so great! You are indeed the chosen king of the humans! Ha 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 ha! It was an unbridled and desperate laughter. It was the self-hatred of being abandoned after giving everything. It was the wailing of being kicked into the endless abyss after thinking that she was saved. After laughing and crying for a long time, Vashti came back to her senses and found herself surrounded. To be precise, she was not surrounded. A large group of people stood outside a powerful protective magic array. In the array, there was only her and Jaina Proudmoore. This was clearly a magic version of a gladiator arena. Are you here to kill me? As soon as she asked, Vashti realized that her question was a bit redundant. She did not recognize any of the people outside the magic array. She was very familiar with the coat of arms on their chests, Kurtira's. Needless to say, Jaina wanted to kill her enemy in front of all the higher-ups of Kurtira's. Selfless revenge in the face of national calamity? What a joke! She did not do it before because it was not time yet. If she did not kill Vashti with her own hands, how could she appease the anger in her heart? Not to mention her, even all the generals and ministers under her would be indignant. Archimonde, who had tortured and killed the previous king, Dai Lin, was already hanging on Mount Hyjal, and the grass on his grave was 3 feet high. Even if the last blow was stabbed by Xueqi, Jaina, who had personally participated in the Archimonde crusade, had received the initial recognition of the people of Kurtira's. As long as Jaina put an end to the death of the previous king and crown prince, it would be a perfect succession for the people of Kurtira's. Jaina held the staff in her hand, and a cold frost aura suddenly erupted from her body like a blizzard, dyeing the entire balcony snow-white in a few seconds. Vashti. I, the current queen of Kurtira's, Jaina Proudmoore, am here to collect a blood debt from you for the death of my brother Thandred's family. What else could Vashti say? Apart from extreme despair and indignation, she had nothing else to say. In the next moment, she had already activated the ultimate transformation spell, turning into the ugly appearance that was hated by the world, and even by herself, a naga with 6 arms and a snake tail. The middle hand on her right crooked her index finger at Jaina. This gesture only meant one thing. Come. Jaina let out a soft shout, activating all the magic circuits in her body. The magic that she had cultivated over the past few years poured out at this moment. This was definitely not a fair duel. It was more like a one-sided massacre. After leaving the water environment, the Naga's combat power would drop by at least 20% to 30%. As the mistress of Karazhan, Jaina had authority second only to Xueqi. The wizard tower was the domain of the wizards, and as the old demigod Mediva's inheritance, The wizard tower itself was already formidable enough. In addition, Karazhan was the core of the entire Azeroth weave. To start a battle in such a place, not to mention Vashj, who had reached the level of a demigod, even Si Thun would probably kneel if he came here alone. The intense battle with no suspense only lasted for 15 minutes. An ice greatsword condensed from the void and shot out like lightning, piercing through Vashj's chest and nailing her to the ground. She did not beg for mercy, nor did she beg for mercy. In the end, Vashj only looked up at the soft moonlight in the sky with her unfocused eyes, and all that was left was confusion. Are you satisfied? Chapter 1433. Jaina was silent. She knew that Vashj's words were not directed at her. It was to Duke that Vashj spoke of her sorrows. Jaina secretly sighed. Putting herself in his shoes, after suffering 10,000 years of suffering and torture, she thought that she could finally live a good life, even offering her soul and loyalty, but in the end, she was betrayed by her master. If it were her, she would also go crazy. But Jaina was not Vashj. She had her subjects and her stand. It was not about right or wrong, just the difference in their standpoints. Jaina found that she no longer hated Vashj. Outside the magic barrier, the generals and ministers raised their right fists and pressed them against their left chests. This was their salute to their queen for completing her great revenge. Before this moment, Jaina had been looking forward to this scene, but now she could not be happy at all. This kind of melancholy was comparable to the guilt of unintentionally killing a civilian girl. She wanted to raise the staff in her hand high and to show off the glory of the queen. The growing sense of guilt in her heart made her arm feel as heavy as 1,000 pounds, and she could not lift it at all. The only thing that could be transmitted to her face was an incomparably formal smile. At this moment, Vashj's pupils that were beginning to slacken instantly shrank. The originally soft and pleasant female voice suddenly turned into a sharp and sinister male voice. Useless. In the next moment, the snake hair that was hanging down and even stiff and broken like a dead snake suddenly grew larger. The tiny snakes instantly turned into octopus tentacles as thick as a thigh and frantically curled towards Jaina. Ah! Without hesitation, Jaina directly used Blink and flashed 30 meters away, sticking closely to the edge of the magic formation. However, the dozens of octopus tentacles grew at the same time, like maggots in a tarsal bone. Almost at the same time, they reached Jaina's feet and easily broke through 2 of Jaina's magic shields. Jaina had been through so many battles and had rich combat experience. When her staff shot out an icicle, but found that it still could not stop the opponent, she cast Ice Barrier in time. But it was useless. It was a feeling of powerlessness as if she was going against the entire endless sea. That kind of divine power that was completely beyond her level easily pierced through the fridge barrier made of super dense ice elements. The tentacles were just a centimeter away from piercing Jaina's body. In that instant, fear froze on the faces of Jaina and every single Kultiras. Even time seemed to have stopped. At this critical moment, an even more powerful and boundless divine power descended upon them. The moonlight was like a dream. The faint moonlight shrouded Jaina's body like a veil, easily separating the terrifying tentacles. The tentacles were twisting ferociously. Jaina, who was tensed up, could clearly see the palm-sized suckers full of sharp teeth extending and retracting in front of her, as if they wanted to grind her to ashes. However, such a short distance was the end of the world. The tentacles couldn't move an inch forward. A pleasant but dignified voice sounded in the sky. Enzos, go back to your abyss. In the next second, all the tentacles that extended from Xueqi's head melted like popsicles under the scorching sun under the moonlight. Only then did Jaina realize that she had been hugged by Xueqi from behind. Xueqi. This is... Jaina was still in shock. Xueqi gently stroked Jaina's brilliant golden shoulder-length hair, a gentle smile on his face. From the moment Azhara fell into the deep sea, all of the high elves became the slaves of Enzos. How could the dignified ancient god Enzos not discover a mere, ultimate transformation spell? Then, Xueqi just thought that she didn't become a Naga. In fact, her heart and soul had long been secretly contaminated by Enzos. N'Zoth planted his own power in her so that one day, he could take revenge on the person who ruined their plans during the ancient war. That is me. At this point, Duke was secretly glad that the system had not scanned Vashj and found a problem. If he had not specially found a place with direct moonlight and asked the moon goddess Elune to hold the fort, he would not have been able to do so. Perhaps he would have been defeated this time. If he had been ambushed by that kind of attack at close range, He would have been in trouble even in his own nest. Just the thought of being ravaged and devoured by a bunch of tentacles made Xueqi want to piss his pants. Jaina's breathing was a little hurried. She widened her bright eyes and suddenly thought of many things. Yes, Xueqi was so cruel because of Enzos using the murmurs of the ancient gods. Xueqi concluded without hesitation. All right. Whether it was true or not, Enzos had to take the blame for this. Forcing me to continue pretending, you can take the blame. Plan worked. Then, did I kill Xueqi by mistake? Jaina gathered her courage and asked. Xueqi said sincerely, kill by mistake? I don't think so. If you didn't kill her, Enzo's backup plan would never have appeared. Don't pursue this matter anymore. Promise me, from this moment onwards, forget your hatred forever. This is good for you, for me, and for the whole of Kultiras. Yes, I will. Jaina nodded heavily, then turned around and faced the generals and ministers of Kultiras, raising the staff in her hand high. I, Jaina Proudmoore, in the name of the Queen of Kultiras, declare that the vengeance of the late King Dayan Proudmoore and my brother Tandred Proudmoore's family has been avenged. From today onwards, the people of Kultiras must learn to forget their hatred and treat the Naga and Murlocs who have joined the alliance fairly and justly. Do you understand? Yes. As your majesty commands. All the generals and ministers knelt on one knee at the same time, lowering their noble heads to their queen. Xueqi. After sending her ministers away, Jaina suddenly felt a little uneasy. Xueqi had helped her so much, it was reasonable to say that she should have come to the magic circuit tonight for an in-death exchange. But she knew that her subjects needed her, and she had to publish the magical image of killing Xueqi as soon as possible. Xueqi showed a gentle smile. Go and win over your subjects today. Today, you are the greatest queen of Kultiras in history. You must be with your subjects. We will talk about our matters later. A large number of Kultiras left. The huge balcony suddenly became empty again. Xueqi walked to Xueqi's corpse. The former queen of Kolaifong was quiet after her death, and died with her eyes wide open. Xueqi smiled. Fool, you have given me your sincerity and loyalty, how can I let you die so easily? A mysterious aura suddenly began to form in the air, and some unknown factor behind the lower realm was restless. Xueqi felt that her soul, which was about to disintegrate, seemed to have received some incredible and mysterious call. Chapter 1434. Where is this? Am I dead? Vashj was in a daze. She felt as if she was in a world of silence. There was no sound of the wind, no chirping of insects, and neither was there the familiar sound of running water or the feeling of flowing water. She was not on the ground, nor was she in the deep water. At this moment, there was a voice in her heart that was extremely clear and certain. It was the voice of hope. Celia. 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 This voice was incomparably indistinct and distant. It was as if the last call was already 10,000 years ago in the ancient times. It was so long ago that she could not remember it. But in the past 10,000 years, every time she woke up from nightmares, it was this voice that comforted her, the voice that she recognized as her true master. That was because she made a wrong choice and was abandoned. It was not a true abandonment. It was all because of the ultimate transformation spell left by her master. I've had enough of the queen's self-hatred. Enough of her bossy attitude. 2 months after falling into the deep sea, she left Azhara City with some of her compatriots who had lost faith in the queen. Every time her compatriots fell into a deep sleep and no one spied on her, she would take off all her clothes and stand in front of the mirror, admiring her unique body. It didn't have that disgusting long snake tail. There were no scales glowing with an ominous green light. There were no sharp and vicious claws. There were no deformed and horrifying 6 arms. In the mirror, she was still as perfect as she was 10,000 years ago. A pair of well-proportioned and fair long legs, a slender and enchanting waist, pink and alluring peaks, and a face that was like a work of art. She once thought that Queen Azhara was the most beautiful existence in the world. Unfortunately, the queen had succumbed to the evil god under the fear of death and became a monster that even she hated. Only I, Vashj, no Celia, escaped this vicious curse. Gently stroking her still perfect body, Vashj fell into some kind of fanatical narcissism. Great master, my lord Mark Dooku, when will you appear? Take me away from this terrifying world? I swear, I will pledge my eternal loyalty to you. Vashj declared herself countless times. Life under the sea was extremely terrifying. There were giant sea beasts that could not be imagined on the surface everywhere. A lamp-like thing was often a bait organ used by a terrifying sea monster to seduce the Naga. Vashti had personally seen no less than 10 of her compatriots. Because they yearned for the light, yearned for the prosperity of the past, when they were on the verge of a mental breakdown, they directly threw themselves forward. The light disappeared, leaving behind only the malevolent mouth of the sea beast with thousands of sharp teeth. Fresh blood and minced meat floated along with the tide. Whether they were willing or not, they could taste their own kind in their cheeks. The nauseating days, day after day, year after year. It was impossible to survive in the deep sea in human form. If they wanted to survive, they could only use the ultimate polymorph to transform into their compatriots and fight with limited nature magic. Because there was hope in her heart, Vashti, who originally didn't have outstanding aptitude, became even more outstanding. Exterminate the sea beasts. Enslaving the water elementals. Subduing the deep-sea giant. Unknowingly, a large group of Nagas had gathered around her. There were men and women. Every one of her subordinates saw her as their hope and their faith. He suddenly smiled bitterly. My greatest hope is actually my master. This sentence of infinite emotion never flowed out of her mouth. Celia. Celia. The call of her former master would ring in her mind every night when she woke up, becoming her motivation to survive. This voice encouraged her. Because her master saw through fate and foresaw all of this in advance. In her bewitched consciousness, this voice had become the majestic pulse of the river of fate. It led her through countless painful times, broke through the fate of certain death, and gave her the courage to lead more compatriots. Yes, this voice was still the embodiment of hope. Master, how can you do this to me? In a trance, she cried. Ha! Am I not dead? Why can I still feel it? In a daze, she suddenly felt as if someone was touching her body. It was cold, but gentle, like a mother caressing her. A mysterious power poured into her body, making her blood flow in her body again, driving away the cold evil, bringing warmth and hope. The mysterious substance in her blood flowed faster and faster, to the point that she felt as if there were countless trains roaring in her body. At this moment, her heart was extremely quiet, as if her soul had detached from her body, floating in the air, quietly watching the strange scene in front of her. There was a strange power circulating in her translucent body. Ah! What is this? The illusion of memories overlapped with the things in her vision, as if for a moment, she had passed through the shackles of time. She saw Azhara City and the Twisted Nether being destroyed in an explosion 10,000 years ago. She saw Stormwind City and the Alliance prospering in the hands of one person. The replacement of the old and the new, the rise and fall of 10,000 years, all stemmed from the hands of one hero. He used the supreme mysterious power of the Bronze Dragon King, Nozdormu, to weave the fate of 10,000 years together. The ancient war, the return of the blaze. Countless creatures threw themselves into it, but only he used his power, strategy, and courage to write the epic of fate that belonged only to him into the real history. Therefore, the greatest legendary hero in the history of Azeroth was born. His name was Mark Dooku. No, that was his fake name. His real name was Duke Marcus, the true master who gave her hope and future. 10,000 years of hardship had become the background. Vashti struggled to raise her head and open her eyes. She vaguely saw Enzoth jump out after her death, and also saw Enzotha's plot thwarted once again. At the end of the scene, she finally saw the figure that haunted her dreams once again. When she saw Duke's gaze meet hers on the other side of the river of fate, she was so shocked that she could not control herself. She blurted out, "Master, so you never abandoned me?" Vashti saw the confident smile on her master's face, as if he had the world and fate in his hands. "Fool, you have given me your sincerity and loyalty. How can I let you die so easily?" Master Duke's voice was like a morning bell, driving away the darkness and waking her up from her daze. I'm not dead?" Vashti struggled to sit up and was stunned to see Duke walking towards her. "No. In order to atone for your sins, the previous you died. But now, I will grant you a new life." Chapter 1435. It was the man who was supposed to be her master, and he slowly walked over in the light. The azure cloak was like the sky, holding up his imposing figure. The white robe symbolized supreme holiness. Behind him, the 6-colored elemental brilliance rotated continuously, but also blended into one. His black eyes were like the deep universe, making it impossible to see the end of it. Xueqi stepped forward, patted her on the shoulder, and only smiled at her. Come on, your resurrection is not complete yet. Brand your soul to Azeroth and become a true demigod. What? A true demigod? Can I? Vashj had yet to come back to her senses. Even if you can't, you have to, or you'll really die. Xueqi smiled and pointed at her chest. There the ice sword that Jaina had summoned had melted, leaving a huge wound. If it were an ordinary creature, it would have long been dead. This. Vashj was at a loss. At this moment, a gentle voice echoed around. Child, don't worry, leave it to me. You just have to follow my lead. Even after 10,000 years, Vashj still clearly remembered who this voice belonged to. The great moon goddess Elune. Elune had once cared for all the night elves, and regarded every night elf as her child. However, some of the elves later became obsessed with the supreme power of arcane magic and abandoned Elune, who they once believed in. These were the High Elves. As a member of the High Elves, it was ironic that they had to rely on Elune's power to obtain salvation at the end. A look of shame immediately appeared on Vashj's face. The temperature of the big hand on her shoulder seemed to rise by 2 degrees. She looked up again, and saw Xueqi's gentle smile. You proved your loyalty to me with your death. Now is my reward for your loyalty. Don't doubt it, don't hesitate. I've already arranged everything. You just have to follow your heart. Vashj nodded vigorously, and then looked at the moon in the sky. She seemed to see the encouragement of the goddess. Then, she slowly closed her eyes, and used her soul to feel this world. Different. There was a huge difference. After Delano advanced to a demigod in the physical sense, it was only her body that had become stronger, and she could not get any response from the dead and collapsed world, let alone borrow power from it. Azeroth was different. This was a world full of vitality. Although the earth had been injured not long ago, it had healed itself after the abscess had been removed. He was completely different from the dead Delano. Moreover, there was an incomparably abundant space for advancement here. If there was a so-called pantheon in Azeroth, then this great hall would be empty at the moment. Already Vashj felt the world respond to her. Welcome, child. In her haze, Vashj heard the planet. Joining the pantheon of planet Azeroth would allow one to obtain the power of the planet and bear the fate of the planet at the same time. He was ruthlessly stabbed by a sword and even lost his life, but the reward was becoming a god. This time, not only did he not suffer a loss, but he had made a huge profit. So, this is the bright path that Master arranged for me. Vashj suddenly sighed with emotion. There was no more hesitation, no more confusion. Vashj walked into the light with her broken body. Late at night, Jaina rolled into Xueqi's bedroom reeking of alcohol. She really rolled, rolling to the ground as soon as she opened the door. At the door, there was a displeased head maid. Xueqi frowned. Vanessa? Queen Proudmoore couldn't stand steadily. This nasty maid meant, I didn't push her. Xueqi rolled his eyes, but eventually went over to help Jaina up and put her on the bed. Obviously, Jaina had groomed herself, but she was so drunk that even her breath reeked of alcohol. Jaina's limbs were not nimble, but her mind seemed to be relatively clear. Xueqi, I'm sorry, I made it difficult for you this time. I know I'll eventually follow you to the divine path, but I still can't abandon Kurtira's. Xueqi smiled. It's okay, I know you're not a bad person, not a twisted and jealous woman. Jaina said apologetically, Is Vashj really dead? Yes, but Azeroth needs more experts to become gods to help fight against the Burning Legion. So, she might become a demigod directly under the planet. Jaina stuck out her tongue. I knew a pervert like you wouldn't do something like that. Humph. Just because she came back to join you after 10,000 years, even a demigod was casually sealed away. And you still say you didn't touch her back then? Xueqi felt bitter. He raised his hands in surrender. I swear, I really didn't do anything to her. I was busy teaching Tyrant at the time. Really? Jaina propped herself up and stared at him. Jaina's eyes were fierce, and so were her magic mountains. Xueqi's interest was piqued. When he moved closer, something suddenly happened. Wah, ugh. Jaina had drunk too much and vomited again. The shameless Xueqi flashed and rolled 10 meters away. He knocked on the door and shouted, Vanessa! Vanessa walked in neatly, and immediately smelled the sour smell of vomit in the air. She immediately spat out her venomous tongue. Humph! A drunk queen is no different from a female drunkard in a tavern. Like an eagle grabbing a chick, she grabbed Jaina and left. Xueqi raised his hand and cast an icy wind, finally dispersing the sour smell in the room. The problem was that even if Vanessa cleaned up the master bedroom later, the smell in the air would still need time to be dispelled. Magic didn't work well against smells. Xueqi scratched his head. It looked like he could only sleep in the guest room next door tonight. In theory, Xueqi did not need to sleep after becoming a demigod. Dooku was a mortal who had ascended to godhood, so sleeping was more of a habit, a rather luxurious enjoyment. After all, the weave was watched by Karthika and the demon king Vek, as well as the system elves. Mark Dooku, who had been left in Draenor, was sleeping. The system elves were watching and would alert Xueqi if anything happened. Xueqi went to sleep peacefully. However, in the middle of the night, Xueqi suddenly felt that something was wrong. This feeling. Woo-woo. Amazing. Who is it? Who is playing with a bite of the tongue? Waking up from his sleep, Xueqi lifted the blanket. Xueqi immediately saw Vash's smiling face in human form. You. When did you come back? It's been a while. What? What are you doing? I'm doing what you loved to do 10,000 years ago. Don't lie to me. You bullied High Priestess Tyrant every day. I was watching from the side. Chapter 1436. Oh no, dark history. It was definitely a dark history. He had thought that there would be no repercussions if he went back to 10,000 years ago. Who knew that Tyrant would be willing to be lonely for him for 10,000 years, and that the little maid he had casually accepted and given a copy of Ultimate Transformation Spell was actually Vash. 10,000 years ago, it was a world that was barren of entertainment. He was used to all kinds of new variety shows, and when he had nothing to do, he would watch movies. He could even go to Bilibili to watch parody videos. Dumok, who had gotten used to this kind of life, was not used to it when he first came to Azeroth. But at that time, he was playing Road to Survival, where he was the main character, and did not have the time to care. Finally, he did not have to suffer so much, and Xueqi did not stop exporting his own goods to Azeroth, such as mechanical pinball games, werewolves and so on. But when he returned to ancient times, he was still deep in enemy territory, and did not have the time to do these. At that time, he was constantly monitored by the Eridar twins, and he was under a lot of pressure. Also, he could not stay for long, so how could he have the mood to export entertainment? Why was the ancient Celestial Empire so prosperous? They did not have the money to light a lamp, so they could only have sex. In Azeroth, it was a similar situation. At that time, in order to prove that he was loyal to the army, he did all kinds of evil, and used all kinds of martial arts on Tyrant. What 48 hands, whatever tortoiseshell divine spell, the High Priestess. If he did not take it easy, and if he revealed his true identity and said, I am actually a good person, he might have really done something like a fallen holy maiden. Alright, the main point was that when he was stirring up trouble, he did not hide it from Vash. At that time, he thought, don't you want to spy on me? I'll let you spy on me. It would be fine if they never met again, but who knew if she would come into contact with me 10,000 years later? It was too long ago, and Xueqi himself had forgotten about it. Now that he thought about it, Vash was the one who completely knew about his dark history and bad habits. Tyrant was the High Priestess, and after being trained by him, as long as he did not embarrass her in public, she would definitely keep her mouth shut. But Vash did not have any scruples. The hypocrite Dumok was shocked. Ah! My glorious image! My hero's halo! It's all over! Xueqi screamed in his heart. No, I must seal Vash's mouth. Just as the thought came to his mind, the system elf ridiculed him for the first time in a long time. Bitches are so unreasonable. Didn't you already use the Xueqi divine sword to seal her mouth? That's right. What am I thinking? The flirtatious Vash paused for a moment, her sweet voice like a cat scratching itself. My dear master, I missed you 10,000 years ago. This time, I didn't let go and completely offered my soul. This was indeed the right decision. I am your little maid, Celia. I was and will always be. As long as you don't abandon me, I will use everything I have to serve you forever. At this point, Vasky paused, her face full of fanatical worship like a martyr. Don't worry, I will definitely protect Master's secret. All of your fantasies can be used on me. Wait a minute. Dumuk put on a stern face and said righteously, No. Actually, you misjudged me. At that time, I shouldered the heavy responsibility of saving the world from being destroyed by the Burning Legion. So I indulged myself and pretended to be evil. I'm not what you think I am. Is that so? The current master is very unconvincing. Vashj used the slender fingers of the night elves to tease him. No. You're mistaken. Duque was resolute. Really? Really? Dumuk was unyielding. All right, please receive my Naga tribe's ultimate technique, water spout. Woo-woo. You can even withstand this? Very good. Now take my six-handed tornado. The rapidly spinning jade-like hands made Vashj in her night elf form look like she really had the 6 hands of the Nagas. This. Dumuk. There would always be a few days in every month when his moral integrity would drop greatly. Other than the times when he was particularly ungentlemanly, he was always a gentleman. It was just that the opponent just happened to catch his flaw, so there was nothing he could do. All the lower limits of moral integrity were man-made. When the man-made settings were destroyed by oneself, then only the will to fight was left. At this moment, in Duque's heart, there was only that incomparably famous incantation. The magically modified version. I am the bones of the sword. One blood, and one blood. Undefeated in countless battles. Never defeated once, and never understood by others. Always standing at the peak of the harem, intoxicated in victory. Thus, moral integrity has no meaning. My body is destined to be born for one blood. Sigh. Didn't they say that Elune would guide Vashj to become a demigod on the side of justice in Azeroth? Why was this fellow so demonic? She had just handed over one blood, yet she was so unrestrained? Could it be that the Nagas relied on waves to swim? Anyway, Duque almost couldn't suppress this seductress. On this side, Duque used the divine sword to teach that seductress Vashj a lesson, not knowing that something almost happened in the Serpent Shrine. What are we now? Human slaves? Perhaps we were defeated, but our main force is still here. Why don't we even have a decent position? What the hell is this? And I heard that because we once destroyed Kultiras, the Alliance Commander Marcus wants to settle accounts with us for Jaina Proudmoore. The news sent by the people below made the Deepwater Lord, Carathilas, secretly shocked. Now the Nagas had almost handed over everything. Even the Kolai Fong Reservoir was controlled by the Alliance. Most of the Nagas were sent to the Taroka Forest to repair the waterways and clear the wild monsters in the tributaries of the various rivers. If the Alliance wanted to burn the bridge after crossing the river, it would be very easy. The entire Naga tribe of more than 100,000 people, plus the servant army, waited uneasily for a full day. On the third morning after their queen left, Vashj finally returned. Seeing Vashj's new appearance, every leader was stunned. Your Majesty, you... Carathilas was completely at a loss for words. What appeared in front of the Naga siren was a true night elf. If it wasn't for the extremely recognizable seductive face that had not changed, everyone would have thought that it was a different person. Fair skin, slightly slender hands and feet, red hair hanging to the waist. If it wasn't for the iconic long ears and eyebrows, they would even think that it was a human instead of a night elf. Not only her appearance, but even her aura had changed greatly. If she was a towering mountain before, now Vashj was the entire earth, vast and incomparably condensed. Vashj flicked her hair. Let me tell you a piece of good news. I have become a demigod of planet Azeroth, and I am the goddess of the lake of Lord Emir Lake. Chapter 1437. What? A true demigod of Azeroth? It took a few seconds for the Nagas to react. This was great news. What were the benefits of joining the Burning Legion? They seemed powerful, but in the end, they were killed like dogs by the natives in their eyes. The huge demon legion was wiped out, and the grave of Archimonde, the commander of the legion, was 3 feet tall. He was forced to join Illidan, who was part of the legion, and in the end, he was beaten black and blue by those bones in Draenor. In the end, he ran to the Outland, a place where even birds wouldn't shit, to eat and wait for death. So what if he dominated the Outland? Who didn't know that the core of this planet had been broken, and the whole planet would perish at any time? On this floating continent that was getting drier and collapsing every day, was it really interesting to do the so-called water pumping work? Countless Nagas wanted to return to the endless sea. Fighting with deep-sea behemoths every day at the bottom of the sea was more promising than now. Now, it seemed that they had lost to the allied forces of the Alliance and the Horde. They had lost face, but they had won. Look at the storm badge on Her Majesty Queen Vashti's left breastplate. In the past few days, they had already figured out that those who could have the storm badge were the direct descendants of the Alliance. Every Naga's eyes lit up. It turned out that Her Majesty had gone to seek status for us. In just a moment, all the Nagas present raised the longbows or tridents in their hands high. Long live Her Majesty Vashti. Her Majesty Vashti is wise and mighty. The cunning of the Nagas also originated from the court struggles of Azhara in ancient times. Anyway, flattery would not cost them anything. The guys who had just questioned Karatheras immediately changed their words and praised him incessantly. Vashti stood up, and with her elegant steps, her whole body was in the color of the lake, and she changed back into her Naga form. However, the sinister and evil snake hair was gone. Instead, it was replaced by red waist-length hair that not even Nagas or night elves had. Vashti's tallest right arm swung with force, her cold, clear and dignified voice resounding. "All right, now, as the Queen of Kolaifeng, the leader of your clan, I declare that from today onwards, I will take on the role of a personal maid as the follower of the demigod of the Azeroth weave, Duke Marcus. I will also change my name to Serenia Ubatilia. And our clan changed our name to Storm Naga." The Nagas did not feel that there was anything wrong with changing their names after voting for a new master. Anyway, after 10,000 years, the Nagas led by Queen Azhara had long since split up. The most loyal royalists were part of the group, while the rest were all looking for their own mothers. There were heretics who believed in the long-dead water elemental Lord Neptulin. There were also non-believers, as well as those who directly bypassed Azhara to lick Thun's boots and become servants of the ancient god. Everyone was happy to see themselves submit to a more powerful master. As for Vashti running off to become a maid, if this was the human ideal, it would be a slap in the face, a self-degradation or something. The Nagas were different. After 10,000 years of cruel competition in the underwater world, they had long developed the habit of respecting the strong. Not to mention being a maid, even if their queen was a slave together with them, wouldn't it still be the same? Moreover, when Vashti explained that she was baptized by Alun, and then placed under Duke's command, the Nagas looked at their queen even more highly. Back in Azeroth, it was a terrifying thing to become enemies with Zoth, but with Alun behind him, it was another matter. Moreover, being sealed off to Lake Lord Emir was also a smart move. This was equivalent to directly avoiding direct competition and confrontation with the king of the deep sea, Zoth. Zoth's strength was very strong in the water, but in the shallow waters of Lake Lord Emir, his strength would definitely be greatly reduced. On the other hand, Duke had also solved a potential problem. One had to know that when they ambushed Deathwing Nesario in Lordaeron City, Zoth directly attacked from Lake Lord Emir, and almost let Nesario escape. In the past, there was no other way without the conditions, but now that there was Vashti, Duke would never let such a ticking time bomb appear in his territory again. For Vashti, whose strength was only a demigod, a vast inland lake was definitely just right for cultivating her divine power. Not only could she nourish herself, but she could also expand the space. Vashti had personally explored that there was a waterway in the depths of Lake Lord Emir that could lead to the endless sea. After the announcement, the Deepwater Lord Karathelas had one last question. "Your Majesty, why did you change your name to Serenia?" Vashti raised her eyebrows. Vashti was one of the culprits who destroyed Kurtira's island back then. The night before yesterday, the Kolaifeng Queen Vashti, who had committed countless crimes, had already been killed by Jaina Proudmoore. So, Vashti is already dead. The new goddess of the lake, the Storm Naga's chief, Serenia Ubatilia, is the new leader who is completely loyal to Master Duke Marcus. Do you understand what I'm saying? This time, Vashti's subordinates all understood. Isn't it just deceiving humans? It's just that she changed the form without changing the dressing. Queen Vashti, on the other hand, didn't even change the dressing. Well, changing the head of a night elf was also considered a head-changing spell. Anyway, Nagas looked the same in the eyes of humans. Wouldn't it be easy to deceive humans? In fact, politics was just like that. Of course, since she was a demigod, Vashti would not let her subordinates have no benefits. The first thing that was given to the most loyal Naga was the incomplete, ultimate transformation. Even if it was a weakened version, it could only allow the Naga to maintain the form of a high elf for half an hour, which was enough to make the Naga, who had been miserable for tens of thousands of years, cry with joy. Next was a batch of epic equipment that had been eliminated from the molten core. The Naga did not have any blacksmiths, and their metallurgy skills were a mess. With this batch of weapons, it could be considered a complete change. In addition, there were also some magic inheritances. After stabilizing the Storm Naga clan, Vashti hurried back to Karazhan. Just as she returned to the top of the tower, she saw Jaina walking out. "Good day, Madam Proudmoore." Vashti, dressed in a white lace-made uniform, obediently moved to the side of the road and gently bent her knees in a ladylike greeting. "Madam?" This form of address made Jaina's heart sweet. She immediately came to her senses and stared at Vashti for a full 3 seconds before finally nodding her head. She only said a few harsh words. "I don't care how many masters you've relied on. If you dare to betray Duke, even if you're a god, I'll definitely kill you again." "Madam is too serious. Ever since Master Marcus gave me my name, I, Serenja Ubatilia, have never changed my loyalty." Vashti's words had a double meaning. Jaina stared at her again and finally sighed softly. "Serve Duque well." "I will." Chapter 1438. Watching Jaina leave in her signature midriff-bearing mage robe, Vashti, who was bowing, secretly smiled. "Of course I will take good care of Master." This time she had completely seen through it. Perhaps this was fate. This epic struggle around all the creatures of Azeroth and the Burning Legion did not belong to a single person, nor did it belong to a single sage. But for a tiny individual like her, if she wanted to struggle and survive, she had to find the most reliable support. Fate had given her a chance, and after missing it, she had endured 10,000 years of hardship. This time, she would not let go of the opportunity no matter what, and as a result, she had this feeling of breaking free from the cage and fate, and flying freely in the vast sea and sky. The true demigod of Azeroth, was it not 10,000 times better than the Grass King who had collapsed the Outland? What was the use of following Illidan? Don't look at how he was a king in the Outland, and it seemed like he was very powerful, but in front of Duque, he was a complete failure. His beloved Tyrande was already in Duque's arms, and his head was filled with endless grasslands. He was addicted to dark energy, but he could not beat Arthas. On the other hand, Arthas was just a pitiful worm that had been beaten up by Duque time and time again. But Illidan could not even beat Arthas. Once the allies reached the Outland, the sturdy Hellfire Citadel did not last long. Hundreds of thousands of fell orcs were in chaos, and 200,000 to 300,000 were captured and killed. When they came to Zangarmarsh, they unreasonably filled up the swamp, and killed more than half of the Naga's precious flying snakes. Fortunately, she saw the opportunity to surrender quickly, and there was still the fate from 10,000 years ago, otherwise. "I always had a premonition that if I didn't rely on Master, I would have died in the Serpent Temple." Vashti muttered to herself, "I never believed that there was a hero who could change fate in this world, but Master, you changed me." Vashti was a little self-deprecating. She did not expect such a yearning to be hidden in her heart. "Thank you, my Master. Thank you for letting me recognize my own limits." There was a voice in her heart that immediately urged her. "Hurry up and hold on to this life-saving straw." Gently pushing open the door, Vashti saw Vanessa, who had a bad expression on her face. She nodded politely, then pushed open the door of the inner room and walked in. "Vashti, aren't you going to deal with the Naga tribe?" Duque's voice gave Vashti an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Vashti first gave a standard palace maid's bow, then replied obediently. "Thank you, Master, for allowing me to spread the ultimate polymorph. Now the entire Storm Nagas are singing praises of Master's greatness." Storm Naga. That's the name given to us by our lineage of Naga in order to thank Master for saving us from our ugly appearance for 10,000 years. If the Master feels that it is not suitable, then we will change it immediately. But the joy of returning to our beauty is absolutely not the slightest bit false. Duque could not help but smile bitterly. The elves were particularly vain. Whether it was the night elves, the high elves, or the blood elves, they all boasted that they were the most beautiful creatures in the world. For other races, even if they were acknowledged in other areas, they would never concede in terms of beauty. In order to prove that she was not lying, Vashti even showed Duque the magical video of the Nagas being overjoyed after turning back into the high elves. This was really not an act. Do they know that they are still Nagas in their bones? Of course, even so, they are already very grateful. Just like me, I also doubted whether the high elf I turned into with the ultimate polymorph was my true body or an illusion. But in those unforgettable painful years, this was already the best comfort for my soul. This flattery was really smooth. Vashj took a step forward. The Storm Naga tribe and I are extremely grateful for Master's gift, so we are willing to do anything for Master, even to die for Master. This was a bit exaggerated. Xueqi sounded strange. At this moment, Xueqi suddenly discovered that there was a layer of water vapor around Vashj's body for some reason. This was like when Xueqi was not familiar enough with elemental energy, letting a few energy balls of arcane, flame, and frost surround him. On the one hand it was a connection, and on the other hand it was to raise his level. Vashj was a Naga, which was understandable. But who could tell him why Vashj's white gauze dress became almost completely transparent when it came into contact with water vapor? A pair of long, straight, and well-rounded legs, coupled with the hazy water vapor, this was simply seductive. The gentleman Xueqi put on a straight face. It's working time now. Don't play this kind of trick again in the future. Vashj bowed deeply, and a burst of dazzling white light blinded Xueqi's corium gold dog eyes. I don't know why, but I suddenly want. Duke mustered up the little bit of moral integrity he had and said sternly. I said. Really? Really? Suddenly, Vashj stuck out her nimble little tongue. It was really nimble. She was clearly a high-born elf now, but her seemingly slightly long tongue displayed special skills that theoretically only Nagas could do. First, it rolled back 360 degrees. Humph. Xueqi forced himself to be calm. Then she returned to her original position and did a left flip, plus the tip of her tongue turning 360 degrees. This was a bit impressive. She returned again, this time with a right flip and a half, plus the tip of her tongue turning 1080 degrees at lightning speed. The wall of Xueqi's moral integrity was instantly smashed to pieces under Vashj's tongue siege hammer. Woo-woo, my moral integrity. It's gone forever. 10 minutes later, Vanessa knocked on the door and came in. She had a cold face. Reporting to Master, a cat that always wants to steal from the wizard tower has disappeared. Is that so? Xueqi sat behind the wide office desk with a serious face, leaning back on the comfortable chair. I heard that the cat ran here. No. This must be an illusion. Vanessa's ears twitched, and her face immediately turned sour. Dear Master Beast Duke, I have the obligation to remind you that the Magic Mirror Conference of the Alliance is about to begin. Please do it quickly. Good. Accurate. Ready. Soon. Immediately. Xueqi's eyebrows furrowed. Vanessa stomped her foot and walked away angrily. Xueqi was excited. He had become a great sage. In the sage's domain, Xueqi began to think about life. He had F*King gotten his most beloved tyrant, and he had maliciously taken his two capable subordinates, Kai Z and Vashj, under his command. Who knew if Illidan would really become a real villain after acting like one for too long? This problem seemed very serious. Chapter 1439. In the original history, Illidan was the ultimate example of infernal affairs. He had fallen into the deepest darkness of evil, and even his appearance was not human. A mouth full of shark teeth, a pair of sharp claws, and a pair of bat wings. Xueqi couldn't even imagine that appearance, let alone do it. What was rare was that after Illidan joined the Burning Legion, he maintained himself, and at the same time gained Sargera's trust. In the end, he made a huge comeback and staged a counterattack against President Sargeras. In this life, it wouldn't be so easy for Illidan to walk this path. With Xueqi's wonderful performance in the ancient war, it would be hundreds of times more difficult to win the trust of the Burning Legion's higher-ups. And the human heart was the most difficult to fathom. Think about it, in history Vashj, who caused the Kaiser and the Blood Elves to bleed, turned from a loyal subject to a traitor because of Duke's chess piece in the ancient war. Now, she is willing to lower herself to become his maid to serve him. Why couldn't Illidan really turn dark? This was a variable that had to be taken into account. No matter what, he had to deal with Illidan first and end the war in the Outland. But recently, there were a lot more demons in the Moon Shadow Valley. The giant robot Doomwalker and a large number of elite demons attacked. Even if they didn't form a battle formation, the pressure on the allies was still quite great. In the Wildhammer stronghold, the mechanized infantry was greatly depleted. It was almost filled with human lives and tanks to ensure the progress of the project. On the other side, in the Blade Peak Mountain, a large number of fell orcs mixed with a considerable number of ogres and golems were gathering. It was unknown when they would attack. My master, are you worried about the war in the Outland? Vashti was clearly a night elf now, but she slipped out like a beautiful snake. She used a little magic to clean herself up, and she was a dignified and beautiful maid again. Xueqi closed his eyes. You can attend the alliance meeting later. Yes. Vashti put her hands gently on her abdomen and stood behind Xueqi in a standard maid's posture. The scheduled time soon arrived, and the light in the room instantly dimmed. A projection of a huge circular table appeared in the originally empty room. Every meter or so, there was a projection of a leader. As soon as the battle started, almost everyone's eyes were on Vashti, who was standing beside Duke. She was killed by His Majesty Proud Moor, and after paying for her sins with her death, Goddess Elune purified her soul. She was killed by His Majesty Proud Moor, and after paying for her sins with her death, Goddess Elune purified her soul. After receiving permission from planet Azeroth's consciousness, she has successfully promoted of Azeroth's daughter of the demigod of Lake. Vashti stepped forward in a dignified and calm manner and bowed to everyone. Your Majesty's leaders, greetings. The old Vashti is dead, and now my name is Salika Ubatilia. With this brand new identity, I will continue to be in charge of the Naga clan, which has been renamed Storm Naga, and serve Master Duke Marcus and the Alliance. After the master and servant finished speaking, everyone couldn't help but look at Jaina. Jaina nodded. In fact, after I killed Vashti, I was ambushed by Enzotha's power lurking in Vashti's body and almost lost my life. Therefore, the hatred between Kurtalas and Vashti was ultimately due to Enzos. Kul Tiras has no enmity with Queen Celia. We will treat Queen Celia and her Storm Naga equally. Alright, even the king had no objections, so the other kings wouldn't either. At this moment, Xueqi said, the Storm Naga and its affiliated aquatic races will join the Alliance as an associate organization. If you wish to become a member of the Alliance in the future, it must be proposed by the leader of the Storm Naga and approved by 2/3 of the representatives of the Alliance. Now that the Alliance was so big, they couldn't just casually accept new members. After all official members have the right to vote. Previously, when the Draenei who believed in the Holy Light joined, it was easier for everyone to accept. If the Nagas became a member as soon as they surrendered, many kingdoms would probably be secretly unhappy. Now that Xueqi had classified the Nagas and the Karaji insect people as an associate organization like the Silver Dawn, everyone felt much better. Agreed. Agreed. After settling the big issue of principle, the leaders changed the topic back to the war in the Outland. First, William reported the situation in the Outland. It had to be said that taking charge of an area could really hone a person. After the Battle of Zal Ghurab, where he commanded a division, and the Battle of Hellfire Citadel as a commander, William had become more stable and capable. Thanks to Commander Xueqi's help, the surrender of the Storm Naga has allowed our supply line to be complete. The scales of victory in the Outland War are indeed tilting towards the Alliance. But I have to point out that our supply line is still too long. On the illusory three-dimensional map of the Outland, William pointed out a few locations. Due to Sar's neutrality with Nagrand, as well as the friendly orc clans, they have contacted and allowed them to join the tribe. Although the tribe has increased by nearly 300,000 people in the past week, it's because we have obtained the food reserves of those clans. Now, the pressure on the Alliance in terms of food has been greatly reduced. I have to point out that this is only temporary. Once the tribe subdues more fell orcs, the pressure on the Alliance army's food supply will be incomparably huge. Our supply line has already reached its limit. Now, every train from the Dark Portal to the Honor Fortress is loaded with supplies and filled with orcs on the return journey. At this point, every leader frowned as they looked at the Alliance report handed over by their deputy. Sar had officially requested for support from the Alliance, hoping that the Alliance could help move millions of orcs to the Kalimdor continent in Azeroth as safely as possible. In exchange, the tribe was willing to be the vanguard in any future battle against the Burning Legion, and they would send at least half of their regular army. To a certain extent, this was also risking their lives in exchange for a future. With the development of technology, the Alliance's army was also changing from cold weapons to firearms. The problem was that firearms were still passable against the small fries of the Burning Legion. Against the truly powerful demons, firearms were completely useless. Therefore they were now walking on two legs. Those who did not have the talent to become professionals were thrown into playing with firearms. Those who had a bit of talent still relied on swords and knives. In many narrow places, firearms were not as reliable as swords and knives. If they attacked the Dark Temple, the compensation for the casualties would obviously be astronomical. It couldn't be better that the tribe was willing to send their soldiers as cannon fodder. But this price, isn't it just food? Just give it to the tribe. Don't forget, apart from the Burning Legion, we still have the Calamity Army. Queen Kalia was the first to make the decision. Chapter 1440. As soon as Kalia said that, all the leaders gasped. No one would forget Arthas. Even though Arthas only played a negative role in Duque's heroic return, the destruction he caused in Lordaeron had yet to be fully recovered. Lordaeron, Silvery Moon, Dalagen, Torrential Fortress. So many capitals had been destroyed or fallen one after another. Even today, 9 years later, not every capital city had been rebuilt. At the very least, the bitter Storm Guardians were still seeking funding from the Alliance to rebuild Torrential Fortress. The pain that the Scourge army had left on the Alliance was too deep. If the countries of the Alliance could barely tolerate the Forgotten Ones, it was because the Forgotten Ones promised not to take the initiative to kill and turn the dead into immortals. The Scourge army was absolutely intolerable. Because the Lich King wanted to kill all the living beings in the world and turn the whole planet into a world of death. Arthas was definitely the public enemy of all living beings. Now that the Alliance was forced to fight everywhere, they had no time to care about the Scourge army. Not having time to care about it didn't mean that they had forgotten it. With the permission of the Wyrmrest Shrine in Northrend's Dragonbone Wilderness, the Alliance, led by MI7 of Stormwind City, had sent core intelligence agents to actively explore Northrend in the northern continent over the years, using special magic tools filled with death aura as a cover. Many excellent spies had been sacrificed, and even those spies had become assassins of the Scourge army in the blink of an eye, causing trouble for MI7. But the sacrifice was worth it. Apart from basically exploring every place in Northrend except Icecrown Fortress, MI7 found the second of the 3 Bronzebeard brothers, Muradin Bronzebeard, under the seemingly vague but actually extremely clear guidance of a certain psychic surnamed Du. Sure enough, just like in history, he was temporarily brain-disabled by Arthas, who had not yet completely fallen, and lost his memory. Then, he was rescued by one of the natives of Northrend, the Ice Dwarf. Then, with a shake of his body, he beat up the Ice Giant and became the publicly elected boss of the Ice Dwarves. Now that this matter had alarmed Magni Bronzebeard, the Dwarf King abandoned his own country, and led a small fleet led by the Heavenbreaker to the Whispering Coast of Lordaeron. This was because the ship that would pick up Muradin would be there soon. The veins on Magni's fists were bulging, and his exact words were, "Amnesia? It doesn't matter, I will give an iron fist of love to that rascal who can even forget his own brother. I guarantee he'll remember everything." Originally, Magni wanted to fly directly to No Scent, but the problems with the flying battleship forced him to give up on that plan. The Iron Furnace Castle itself was in a world of ice and snow. The dwarves' products were only slightly less effective in the heat, but they also had enough anti-freezing equipment. The problem was that the device was suitable for -10 degrees Celsius, but it would fail at -40 degrees Celsius. This was not a problem that could be solved with antifreeze oil. If the Alliance wanted to attack Nossen's Icecrown Fort, all their heavy equipment couldn't be used. In other words, forcefully attacking meant sacrificing human lives. It would be great if the tribe was willing to be the vanguard. It was true that the Alliance was under a lot of pressure in terms of food and economy. As long as the Horde did not start a war with the Alliance and continued to be hostile to the Cataclysm, it would be a good bet. There were 3 rich countries with the most surplus food in the Alliance. Lordaeron, who purified the eastern plaguelands and revived the Tirisful Glades. New Alterac, who opened up the Hillsbrad Plains and took over thousands of miles of fertile land during the Second Battle of the Dark Portal. Stormwind, who owned the Western Plains, formerly the Western Wilderness, Elven Forest, and the 3 major grain-producing areas in the north of Stranglethorn Vale. Due to the principle of proximity, the food transported to the outer regions was basically provided by Stormwind. Stormwind was already having a hard time. However, Kalia took the lead to settle the food for the Horde immigrants. Due to the principle of advancing and retreating together, Elusia made the decision on the spot. With the support of the 3 major grain-producing countries, the Alliance's decision was also passed. Next question. William heaved a sigh of relief. Due to the large number of Orc immigrants crossing the border, there is still enough food in the outer regions for a short period of time. My logistics minister told me that the food shortage in a month's time is estimated to be no less than 300,000 tons. This question made the leaders of the alliance frown. The dark portal couldn't be opened for a long time. This was because teleportation meant a huge loss of energy. Where did the energy come from? After the cursed land became a barren wasteland, the energy to open the teleportation portal basically came from the outer regions. The dark portal absorbed the surrounding energy to maintain itself. This formed a paradox. If they wanted to increase their supplies, they needed more energy. Absorbing more energy might cause Draenor's collapse to accelerate. If they were not careful, they would lose everything, and everyone in the outer regions would die together. Moreover, before the orcs were completely evacuated, the Horde would not allow the Alliance to destroy Draenor. Otherwise, they would not hesitate to start a war. At this moment Vashj, who was beside Xueqi, raised her hand gently and requested to speak. Geh. Seleka, go ahead. Xueqi called out Vashj's name. The storm nagas can supply a portion of the food from the outer regions. Because there is no pollution in the Serpent Lake, the polluted water has already been drained to the swamp further west through the pipes. If we were to release the harvesting... Vashj glanced at Tyrande and changed her words. If we can ensure a sustainable supply, the storm nagas can provide 200,000 tons of unpolluted fish to the surrounding 4 regions every month. What about further? William asked. The fish will rot. Xueqi pondered for a moment. Under the premise that we don't fish out all the fry, what is the maximum output of Zangermarsh per month? 500,000 tons. Vashj's answer made the big shots of the Alliance gasp in surprise. Xueqi decided. 400,000 tons per month. Half of it will be supplied in the form of fresh fish, and the other half will be supplied by the Alliance to be salted into salted fish for the Horde's immigrants to eat. No one would have thought that the Storm Nagas could actually solve the biggest food problem by relying on them. From the looks of it now, the Naga tribe had turned from the biggest obstacle to the biggest help. The Alliance had really profited. Wow, Xueqi, I really envy you. Let's see when the Wildhammer dwarves will also take in a vassal race to play with? Cudrin Wildhammer laughed. You can take in the harpies. Xueqi's words killed Cudrin. Cudrin's face turned green as he thought of the harpies who would gang up on him because of the language barrier. All right, let's stop joking. William, do you have any more questions? One last question. It is impossible for our forces to fight at full strength on both fronts. If possible, I hope to cooperate with the Horde to solve the Blade Peak and Netherstorm regions first. William pointed to the northern part of the outer regions map. Chapter 1441. Firstly, there are fell orcs attacking from behind. Even if the Storm Nagas help us block the attack from the Blade Peak mountain, we still can't rescue the Draenei and Kale, that's Blood Elves who are trapped in the Storm Fortress. Secondly, we know too little about the Moon Shadow Valley. If we launch an all-out attack, the Burning Legion might ambush us from behind. Also, the Moon Shadow Valley is too vast. We need 1 or 2 large fortresses as a base. Actually, William was more worried about something else. The Alliance now had flying battleships and could play with heavenly justice. But the Burning Legion had space battleships and could also play with demons from the sky. The troops that tried to attack the Moon Shadow Valley were destroyed by the hellfire that fell from the sky several times. Draenor did not have a planetary protection array, and this so-called atmosphere was not fortified. The current technology was not reliable at all in terms of air defense. Only the magic tower was more effective. This meant that the attack on the Darkness Shrine would not be done in one go. It had to be pushed forward slowly. In a situation where there were worries and there was no forward base, it would be easy to get into trouble if they rashly sent in all their troops. However, it was not easy to repair the forward base while resisting the attack of the demons in the Moon Shadow Valley. Hence, William pushed the responsibility to him. They could either give him more troops or help him resist the enemies in the Moon Shadow Valley. It would be best if the forward base could be repaired before the army returned. No leader raised any opinions on the spot. Everyone looked at Xueqi. This time, Xueqi was a little ungrateful. He said that he would let William be the commander of the expeditionary army. In the end, when they finally conquered the Hellfire Fortress, Xueqi got his substitute to do the work secretly and took over Vashj. Of course, William also knew that it would be difficult for him to monopolize power in the Outland. Firstly, he did not have the status and qualifications to control Thrall. He had no choice but to kick the ball back to Xueqi. Xueqi thought for a moment and made a decision. My substitute, Mark Dooku, will be in charge of building the Wild Hammer Fortress as a forward base. During this period, Qudran, Bulang, Lilith, Vashj, and their subordinates will be under Mark Dooku. Yes, Sir Willan. Please send an elite troop to assist us. Understood. Understood. Yes, Master. No problem. All the leaders agreed. Xueqi turned to face William's projection. I'll give you 3 months at most. In at most 3 months, I hope to see your main force return with the Dreeny Eye and Kale, that's division. Leave it to me. William patted his chest. The next day, a flock of griffins flapped their wings and passed through the dark, psychedelic night sky. Behind the Griffin Knights was a rather scattered fleet of airships. The entire fleet departed from Fort Glory and took a detour around the thorny rocky grounds. They didn't enter Fort Windrunner but directly flew north and entered Moon Shadow Valley. Along the way, there were many accidents. For some unknown reason, both the man and the griffin exploded in midair. He had also personally witnessed the scene of a plane full of people and goods crashing in the sky. The laws of the Draenor world seemed to be crumbling. There was no possibility of rebuilding this special world that lacked a core and only had a few continents floating in the void. In any case, Delano would obviously die in the long river of history faster than in the original history. As the fleet swept across the dark land west of Moon Shadow Valley, the power of the dark energy could be seen eroding the entire Moon Shadow Valley. It could be seen without binoculars, as the dark energy was rampant on this continent. The highly concentrated energy had attracted the demons in the void. Almost all the demon species of the Burning Legion could be found here. Imps, Cerberus, Demonic Guardians, Dread Guardians, Shivala, Doom Guard. There were even groups of demons gathering and swarming towards the center of Moon Shadow Valley where the mana smelting pool and other areas with high energy response. Looking down from the sky, it looked like a wave of darkness. Hoof Imriel, who was standing beside Mark Dooku, shuddered. Seeing the place where she used to live turned into such a ghastly state, she thought of the temple of Karabair that she had stayed in for a long time becoming a temple of darkness. She shuddered. Bulang complained. Hey, we're really going to build a city here. Are you mentally prepared to lose 100,000 dwarven boys? Thinking of relying on less than 10,000 dwarves to build a city in a place surrounded by demons, Bulang's scalp went numb. After all, when the construction of the Wild Hammer Fortress failed, more than 3,000 people died, and the 5,000 who came back were all injured. 3,000 people did not sound like a lot, but many of them were elite dwarven engineers and craftsmen. Bulang's heart ached. Dwarves had long lifespans and a long growth period. No matter how they encouraged reproduction, it was not easy to make up for the losses in war. At this time, Xueqi smiled. I'll be in charge of this, don't worry. When have I ever let you down? At this moment, Vashj's magical message came. Master, everything is ready. Let's begin. After Xueqi gave the order, there was silence for a few minutes. If one was not familiar with Xueqi, they might think that Xueqi was pretending to be a fool. At this moment, from the direction they flew from, a silver line suddenly appeared, stretching from north to south for who knows how many kilometers. Rumble. A shocking and terrifying sound came from far and near. This is... His hooves gripped the side of the ship, and even his tail that always swung around stopped moving. F***CK. So generous? Bulang's jaw dropped, and even the wine bottle in his hand fell to the ground. Xueqi's smile was full of absolute confidence. I've always been generous. It was a waterline that connected heaven and earth. Innumerable huge waves of several tens of meters high rushed towards the Moon Shadow Valley from west to east. The surging waves showed what it meant to be a raging wave. Whether it was the Black Land, the wooden houses built on the hills by the old beast men, or the ferocious demons that were wreaking havoc on the land, they were all easily swallowed by this terrifying wave. The muddy tide easily filled up every low-lying area of Moon Shadow Valley within his field of vision. Imriel covered her mouth with her hand. She had witnessed Xueqi's miraculous actions more than once. Filling up the lake like a whip to stop the flow, a big move that flooded half of Moon Shadow Valley. This imagination, this ability to execute. Is Mark Dooku really an ordinary Radiant Moon Great Wizard? Imriel's curiosity was about to explode, almost causing her to suffer internal injuries. Xueqi casually pointed, and that finger seemed to be pointing at everything. Actually, the bottom of Zangermarsh is very big, and the lakes in the swamp are very deep. Because Vashti used a water pump, almost all of Draenor's water was concentrated in the Serpent Lake. What I'm doing now is just letting Vashti return the water that she took back to the east of Terakar Forest. Chapter 1442. Bu Lang's eyes flashed. And then you get someone to blow up the higher entrance of the Moon Shadow Valley, and let the massive amount of water pour into the valley? Duque smiled. Everything was calculated by the system. After scanning the topographic map of the entire Moon Shadow Valley, the system elf prompted Duque if he wanted to do Guan Er Gu drown the 7 armies. Duque decisively clicked yes. When he came to the Moon Shadow Valley as a player before he transmigrated, he did not think that it was that bad. At most, it was the depressing sky, the slightly nauseating atmosphere, and the color rendering. Only when he came to the Moon Shadow Valley did he realize that it was not a place for people to stay. On the black land eroded by the dark energy, there was a dry and stinky wind everywhere, and the air was filled with a nauseating smell. There was no clean water to be found. After flying on the Griffin for a whole day, all he saw was a neon green dark energy lake. That bright green color easily made people think of something like nuclear cola, radiation sickness, and the like. Duque strongly suspected that staying in this place for 3 months, any normal person would become demonic, and become neither human nor ghost. The dwarves who tried to build the Wildhammer Fortress had to dig deep wells to extract the muddy water, filter it, and then pour large bottles of Shotrath holy water to neutralize it before they dared to drink it. Building a castle, even if it was mechanized, was heavy physical labor. Water was essential, or else people would die. Since he had to clean up the scattered demons, Duque might as well flood the entire western half of the Moon Shadow Valley. Looking down from the airship, this sea-like scenery could not be said to be boundless, but it had an even more shocking effect. The airship fleet was less than 20 kilometers into the Moon Shadow Valley, and geographically, they had just come in through the narrowest funnel-shaped entrance on the ground. If the waterline came from the west, they could barely see the end of the waterline, but as the Moon Shadow Valley's basin-like structure moved from west to east, the area of flat land became larger and larger. After the waves pushed over, it formed a long arc, so long that the end could not be seen. Only at the north and south sides of it, the end could barely be seen. Because the sky above the Moon Shadow Valley was shrouded in a large amount of demonic fog, the lighting was quite poor. Even with binoculars, one could only see the undulating shadows. Even though he knew that it was the mountain range that surrounded the entire Moon Shadow Valley, he still felt as if it was the border between the sea and the void, as if it was merely the dark oil paint of a painter's brush. Under the outline of the long mountain ranges in the north and south, there was a lake that was muddy and a bit green. It couldn't be said to be boundless, but the feeling of washing away all the rubbish was quite satisfying. The flying fleet continued to advance. After more than an hour, they arrived at the location of the abandoned Wildhammer stronghold. It was a typical hill. Although it was not too high, it was still more than 100 meters above the valley floor. The corpses that they didn't manage to retrieve in time had already been devoured by wild beasts until only a few bones were left. The remnants of the abandoned city walls still had the incomparably tyrannical claw marks of the evil demons. But now everything was different. Hellfire, aren't you very powerful? Burn everything, burn, burn. Do you have the ability to evaporate this sea-like lake? Helldog, aren't you very fast? Do you have the ability to accelerate from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in water for me to see? Although the old site of the Wildhammer stronghold in the southern mountain range now looked like a lone island in the middle of the ocean, the Burning Legion, who were only good at land and air battles, had no way of passing through this vast lake. Coming down from the flying battleship, Mark Dooku and his men stood at the edge of this peninsula, their expressions extremely relaxed. Bu Lang called out to his men, "Little bastards, hurry up and get to work. I want to see a beginner-level beach-blocking position with anti-air firepower within half an hour." Kudrin Wildhammer got down from his Griffin King Scarlet. They had been flying for 3 hours since they left Fort Windrunner. Even the Griffin King was a little tired, let alone the other griffins. "Yo, Duque, can't you get your Storm Naga to control this area of water? Then we only need to guard against the enemies coming from the sky." Duque shook his head and pointed to the fluorescent green surface of the water. "You swim in it every day. If there's no holy light to help you expel the evil energy in your body, let's see if you'll turn into a demon." If not for the large amount of evil energy in the water, Duque would really have mobilized the Naga to defend. After all, The demons of the Burning Legion were almost all-terrain creatures. Many demons could breathe better, and even if they could not, they could make do. Xueqi had seen the records. In the past 25,000 years, the Burning Legion could even conquer and destroy the gaseous creatures of the gaseous planets, let alone a small water attack. This was just an obstacle, not an insurmountable moat. Of course, the small-scale Naga troops were still prepared. There was a 1,000-strong elite Naga team on the transport ship. If the pressure on the front line was too great, Xueqi would invest in this team of Nagas. At most, he would use the diluted holy water of Shotrath City to bathe the Nagas. However, for 3 days in a row, there was no danger. There were indeed demons emerging from the water like the Loch Ness Monster, but there were not many who actually attacked the fortress in the building. More of them were the instincts of the low-level demons driving the scattered demons to break into the fortress defense circle. They came at irregular intervals. Sometimes it was just 1 or 2 hellhounds coming to deliver food, and sometimes it was a whole team of demon guards. This was a pain in the ass for the defenders. They could only deploy as many troops as possible, divided into 4 teams, and rotated every 2 hours. Each time, there would be no less than 3,000 troops stationed on the shore. After 3 days, even if they ran to stand for 2 hours every 6 hours, the morale of the troops was clearly low. After all, no one knew how many demons would follow after the first one emerged from the water. Sending out Naga scouts was not a good move. There was a lot of green evil energy in the water, and the water was murky. The range of detection was quite limited, and there were Nagas who were killed and could not come back. Well, this is forcing me to use my ultimate move. Xueqi sighed. On the morning of the 4th day, on the makeshift dock, everyone saw a strange new machine that extended part of its parts into the water. Xueqi stood in front of the machine and proudly announced to a group of dwarves, gnome craftsmen and scientists, "Hello everyone, welcome to the latest masterpiece of Marcus Future Technology Company, Limited, the underwater sonar system." Sonar is an electronic device that uses the transmission characteristics of sound waves underwater, and through electroacoustic conversion and information processing, it completes underwater detection and communication tasks. Our new passive product belongs to the category of acoustic positioning. By monitoring the noise in the water, we can roughly determine how many enemies are coming and what their size is. Chapter 1443. Passive Sonar. Passive sonar technology refers to the sonar passively receiving the radiation noise produced by underwater targets such as ships and signals emitted by underwater acoustic equipment to determine the position and distance of the target. It evolved from a simple hydrophone. It listened to the noise emitted by the target and determined the position and some characteristics of the target. It was especially suitable for situations where one could not make a sound and had to detect the movements of the enemy ships. Xueqi definitely wanted to make an active sonar, but the problem was that even if he kept instilling advanced technology into the scientists of Steel Stove Fort and Storm City, with the industrial level of this era, it was impossible to make it. For example, the sealing technology of this era was not up to standard at all. The ship's steel plates made of willow nails and welded together were still passable on the water, but when the pressure was higher underwater, it would be like a fountain everywhere. That experiment almost cost 2 senior scientists and a bunch of engineers. They could only settle for the next best thing, which was to make a coastal sonar. Of course, in order to locate the target more clearly, he had people set up a sound transmission device 500 meters away from the water's edge and not too deep. Xueqi controlled Mark Dooku. With a pretentious smile on his face, he twisted the button of the sonar device. From the loudspeaker, everyone could hear a very rhythmic beep, beep, beep sound. Xueqi continued to explain, "This is the sound we actively emit. We only need to listen for any clutter in the echo, and we can roughly determine the enemy's position and number." Before Xueqi could finish, a loud sound suddenly came from the loudspeaker. Thump, 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 thump. Xueqi was stunned when he heard this. A bunch of extremely imaginative dwarves suddenly began to make all sorts of comments. "This sound, it sounds so real. It feels like there's something beating in this thing." Bu Lang was the first to speak. "Yeah. Could it be the footsteps of demons walking underwater?" Comrade Kudrin's imagination ran wild. "Yeah, most demons can't swim. They do walk underwater. But this sound is a little too sharp and clear. Shouldn't the sound underwater be a little more vague?" Bu Lang retorted. Only Xueqi's face turned green. As a veteran who has watched classic submarine war movies such as U-571, he certainly knew that this had nothing to do with sonar. With just a scan, the system found out what was inside the heavily guarded sonar system that he treated like a treasure. It was actually a bunch of little iguanas. Many of the Alliance's soldiers on the Draenor continent must have seen many of these annoying fairies. Although these palm-sized iguanas didn't have powerful attacks and didn't have strong bodies, and they looked easy to bully, they always moved in groups. It reminded you of a nostalgic species on the Azeroth continent. That's right. Murlocs. Woo 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 woo. However, these fairies were not as annoying as the Murlocs. The first time they saw the iguana, they thought it was a little scary. They had the heads of frogs, sharp teeth, small eyes, rough claws with 4 fingers, and a wretched figure. However, after seeing them many times on the Draenor continent and slowly getting used to it, you would realize that they were a little cute. It would be weird. Xueqi was furious. The sonar was his treasure. When he was not sure that Vashj was Salagia, the sonar was his ultimate weapon against the Nagas. Who dares to put a group of little iguana people in my latest invention? There was only one answer. Xueqi's roar resounded through the entire shore. The hoof, who was standing not far away, heard Xueqi's roar. How could she not know that she had been exposed? Her whole body stiffened for a full second as if she had been electrocuted. Then, she shrank her head and actually wanted to sneak into the crowd and run away. The problem was that her mind was in a mess. She did not realize that she was surrounded by dwarves. She was more than a head taller than the dwarves. This stupid attempt to cover up made Xueqi even angrier. He immediately flashed over. Oh! Imriel screamed, turned around, and galloped away. Run? Why are you still running? Xueqi was quick and grabbed the hoof's tail that was seriously lagging behind. The hoof's body stiffened again as if she had been electrocuted. Xueqi grabbed the hoof's waist and directly lifted her like a sack of rice. Someone, disassemble the sonar system. First, get rid of the little iguana people inside. I will first teach this idiot a lesson. The hoof screamed. The holy light education of a Karabo apprentice made her not dare to lie. No, I know I was wrong. I saw that your big iron box was empty and thought it was useless. It just so happened that Han Lin had pissed me off last time, so I wanted to give him some little iguana people. I really did not want to destroy your important new equipment. Who knew that Duke would get even angrier? Your King prank destroyed the latest invention of Marcus Future Technology Company, Limited. Begging for mercy is useless. This time, I must teach you an unforgettable lesson. Xueqi strode forward with the hoof on his shoulder, and rushed into an empty storeroom by the shore. He sat down directly and pressed his knee against the hoof's lower abdomen. He grabbed her tail and fiercely spanked her butt. No. Don't spank me. Cried. She really cried. She had never been spanked in her entire life. Beside the storeroom, everyone was speechless. What was up with this combination? Even the Draenei garrison officer did not know what to say. They had also seen the advanced technology of the Alliance. To the Draenei universe, the technology of the Alliance was very basic. The problem was that the Draenei's own technology had been lost in the 25,000 years of escape. Because Draenei scientists had died in various accidents, most of the knowledge and technology had been lost. Many of the machines did not even know how to use, so their most reliable weapons were warhammers and holy light. Under such circumstances, being spanked was already a small punishment for their contact who had destroyed the advanced technology of the Alliance. According to the military law of the Alliance, if this Mark Dooku wanted to kill her, they would not know how to plead. 5 minutes later, Xueqi came out angrily, followed by a hoof who was covering her red and swollen butt. Humph. Do you still dare to mess around? Xueqi asked angrily. Sob. The hoof was crying. I'm asking you a question. Sob. I don't dare anymore. The hoof looked aggrieved, like a young wife who had just been harassed by a hooligan. At this moment, Xueqi still did not know that because he had spanked the hoof had actually covered her, but every time she saw him. Perhaps in the hoof's eyes, the word hooligan had already been carved on Mark Dooku's forehead, and it could never be washed away. Chapter 1444. No dash. Wait, you're not going to spank me today, are you? I can work, but you have to swear that if I make a mistake today, you won't spank me. This was what happened when Xueqi met the hoof almost every day. A good hoof with a bright future. In theory, he could become an archbishop's hoof. Why did he become a crazy woman with persecutory delusions after being spanked once? Do you know how many players who had delusions about you in the past will be in despair now? Duke clutched his head in pain, his face full of black lines. Duke, are you not feeling well today? The hoof came over to ask Duque with concern, still clutching his butt. What the hell is this? Are you doing this out of kindness, or to piss me off? Or to piss me off out of kindness? Duque wanted to strangle Imriel. Duque could not take it anymore and decided to have a showdown with the hoof. I, Mark Dooku, swear in the name of the weave demigod Duke Marcus that as long as you don't cause trouble and destroy the Alliance's cutting-edge equipment, I will definitely not punish you. Otherwise, I will let the weave demigod give Mark Dooku the most tragic destruction. Wah! Everyone was shocked. Because Duque said this in the command center. When he said this, the two kings Gavasht, and a bunch of lords with titles of generals all heard it. Duque was controlling Mark, a delicate puppet. This was something only those who had the qualifications to attend the highest meeting of the Alliance knew. Bu Lang and Kudrin rolled their eyes, completely speechless. Alright, this guy was Duque. Who the hell would go back on his word to punish himself? But the others did not know. The group of generals sighed at the seriousness of this guy's oath. Imriel was naturally the first to fall for it. Really? The hoof did not panic, his butt no longer hurt, and his legs became nimble. He came over eagerly. It's true. If Mark Dooku lied to you, then he's not human. A certain Dooku who was disguised as Mark swore that it had nothing to do with him. The hoof who did not know how sinister people's hearts could be believed. She was so moved that she almost burst into tears. She grabbed Mark's hand and said excitedly, Okay, I was wrong about you. Master Willan said that my holy light theory is already the strongest, but I need more experience to elevate my spirit and make my holy light even purer. Mark, since you're the boss here, give me a mission. I've been watching those dwarves build the city all day. I'm going crazy from boredom. With a smile on his face, Duque announced, Imriel, lead your troops to attack Illidair's sentry post on the west side of this place. Just use your garrison, the Highland Warriors Group, and 7 other organizations. That's a total of 2,000 people. Ah! The hoof was dumbfounded. What? Several generals jumped up, especially the dwarf Lord Yurgar, who was in charge of the frontline defense. Wait! Envoy, I object. Even if the Highland Warriors Group is not directly under the jurisdiction of the Alliance, there's no reason for us to let a Karabo apprentice who doesn't have a military rank in the Alliance to command an army of 2,000 people. However, Duque looked as if he had seen through everything and was unperturbed. Of course, although there probably wouldn't be any king of Draenor drama in the future, but gold would always shine. After transmigrating to the world of Azeroth for so long, Duque was basically certain that those who shone brilliantly in the original history would not be too bad in terms of quality. The problem was that without the tempering given to the hoof in the original history, Duque really did not dare to say whether she would grow to the height of the Archbishop. Anyway, it was Willan who gave the hoof a chance to help her grow, and Duque did not mind him doing it once. Duque ignored Yurgar and looked at his boss. Your Majesty Kudrin Wildhammer, do you object to my decision? Object. Object my ass. To object to this doll named Mark was to object to Duque, who was hiding in Karazhan on the other side of the world and playing doll games. Kudrin was too full to be so stupid. Although the dwarves were more straightforward, how could a king be so stupid? Kudrin patted his High Lord on the back. Didn't you complain all day that Illidan's men on the other side of the mountain often come over the mountain to cause trouble for you? Isn't this just right? Anyway, the Draenei can't help in the defensive line. Yurgar looked like he was choking. Since his boss said so, what else could he say? The Wildhammer dwarves were famous for their Griffin Air Force, but in fact, they still had a lot of land forces. As close friends of the Bronzebeard dwarves, their infantry and cannons were also very good at coordinating. Many times, the Wildhammer dwarves' infantry almost followed the landing point of the cannonball and charged forward. Once they found that there were too many demons, they could directly stop and all lie down. They would wait for the cannoneers who were originally playing with the cannons to adjust the firing rate, then fire another round and then charge again. The Draenei who were not familiar with this tactic were really powerless and could only stare at the back. Rather than letting these Draenei rot, it was more practical to let them go and wipe out the surrounding enemy strongholds. Yurgar was also discouraged. Well, since the special envoy and my king have said so. At this time, Hoof finally reacted and should protest. Who knew? Just as she sighed, she found that Duque had already King asked for an official seal from Kudrin and stamped it on the military order. Wait. I haven't agreed yet. Hoof's face turned pale. Please, this is a military order. You must complete it regardless of whether you agree or not, otherwise you will be punished according to military law, Duque said confidently and matter-of-factly. When Hoof still wanted to say something, she was suddenly pulled back by her compatriots. Garrison Officer Murad was a determined warrior. He had helped the Dreenii in countless worlds to avoid the Burning Legion's demon army time and time again. He was a role model among the Dreenii. His unparalleled combat skills and thunderous methods to uphold justice had earned him the respect of his compatriots. After Shotrath City was safe, this battle-hardened garrison officer was sent by Willan to support the front lines as the representative of the Dreenii. Murad spoke, Imriel, we carry the hopes of our compatriots and come to the front lines to fight against evil. If we can't even destroy one of the enemy sentries, how can we talk about attacking the Black Temple, restoring it to the Temple of Karabaer, and restoring its former glory? His words were completely politically correct. Hoof did not have any room to refute. Her superiors sold her out, and her compatriots sold her out. What else could she say? So, Hoof prepared to go to battle with tears in her eyes. Before she left, she gave Duke a tragic look. Her big watery eyes were clearly saying, Are you sure you're not sending me to my death? Duque smiled. No, I have faith in you, Hoof. Chapter 1445. Bu Lang and Kudrin sent their men out of the command post after the Dreenii's main force had set off. Bu Lang felt a little strange. Oh, is it worth it to torment a girl like this? Considering the Dreenii's lifespan and the fact that they have a long adolescence, she's at most a 15-year-old human girl. Duque rubbed his chin, his expression a little playful. Whenever a country or a race is in danger, there will always be heroes who appear out of nowhere. It's just that some will grow up smoothly, while others will grow too slowly and die young. Not every hero is called Duke Marcus. Some heroes look like flowers in a greenhouse before they grow up, and can't withstand the wind and rain. But you two take a look at Varian. Before the incident with Onyxia, he was nothing more than a well-educated nobleman. Duque's words implied that if it wasn't for his bloodline, Varian wouldn't even have the right to be king. Bu Lang and Kudrin couldn't help but nod. If it wasn't for that cruel life as a gladiator, there wouldn't be a strong-willed Varian today. At the same time, because of Duque's existence and the reintegration of another Varian personality, Varian's excessive violent tendencies were suppressed. Now, anyone could see that Varian was developing into an excellent leader. Not only for Stormwind, but also for the entire Alliance. To put it bluntly, if Duque ascended to become a true god and had to abandon the Alliance wouldn't lack a standard-bearer. It wasn't that the queens of the various human kingdoms weren't outstanding, but they all lacked a kind of unity, a kind of boldness that other kings and leaders would approve of. As the most populous and powerful race in the current alliance, the core of the alliance was destined to be controlled by humans. Among the human kings, Kalia developed Lordaeron into a logistics country. Most of her energy was actually placed on the people's livelihood and armaments. In fact, after Mograine's retirement and Abendis's disappearance, Lordaeron didn't have a decent commander-in-chief. Tyrion Fordring was only suitable for heroic battles, not commanding. Elucia, if her throne wasn't taken away, she was more like a merchant lady. Jaina was capable, but her ability to see the bigger picture was lacking. On the surface, the Dalajan was in a power vacuum, but in reality, it was under Duque's direct rule. Stormguard's Daneth Trollbane. At most, he would become a king on the surface, but in reality, he would take charge of an entire region. Leading an army was already this silent man's greatest limit. After much consideration, in the end, Duque was no longer around, and only William, who had grown up, was the most reassuring. However, the two dwarves were still very pleased with Duque's unbiased way of cultivating the seedlings of the various races. Bu Lang said, Speaking of which, are you really that confident in letting that little hussy go? Duque rolled his eyes. Even Mark Dooku can stand in front of you. What are you worried about? The two dwarf kings immediately understood. Since Mark Dooku was here, it proved that this was the area covered by the magic net. As long as there was a strong enough magic net node, Duque could send over demigod-level powerhouses at any time, just like in the Serpent Shrine Cavern. The Wildhammer Fortress was the core stronghold for attacking the Shrine of Darkness, so the magic net here was of course of the highest level. The Illidari sentry post next door was just a small hill away. It had to be said that Xueqi had put in a lot of effort to groom Imriel. But the hussy herself didn't know. 5 kilometers away from the Wildhammer Fortress, the sky suddenly darkened. First, it was a smear of scarlet that gradually dyed the black sky, as if it was a sign of destruction. In a moment, the color began to turn into an extremely disgusting dark green. It was not difficult to imagine what kind of evil existed in the Illidari sentry post in front. Imriel thought about it again and again. He raised his arm twice, and finally raised it. That was a signal to stop. The Dreenii garrison stopped in unison, and so did the cooperating quasi-military organization. Garrison Officer Maralad, I think. Should we investigate first? Imriel said with a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Very wise decision, Commander Imriel. Obviously, his position should be higher. As a garrison officer, Maralad had the style of a soldier and the spirit of a warrior. He did not underestimate Imriel, this so-called commander who had come out of nowhere. Then, I'll leave it to you to arrange. Imriel secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Maralad waved his hand and made a gesture. Immediately, the Highland Warriors and another organization called the Aurora Group sent people over. Maralad ordered meticulously, Thomas, Jared, Commander Imriel, we need to investigate as much as possible without alerting the enemy. Send out your best men. Not only do we need binoculars to observe, but we also need an accurate count of the enemy's numbers and types. It would be better if we could estimate the general strength of the enemy. You have an hour. Understood. The Dreenii's hooves made too much noise. In addition to their taller bodies, they might be good warriors or good paladins, but they were definitely not good thieves. In terms of investigation, the Dreenii were no match for the dwarf thieves and elven thieves. The situation was quickly reported back. There were not many enemies at the sentry post, only about 100. The problem was that the enemy was very strong. 30 Illidari terror emissaries, 63 Illidari commandos, the great demon Lotharis, the Queen of Pain Gabrisa. The information is so accurate? Although Imriel had never led troops before, seeing such a detailed report, she still felt as if she had been deceived. Thomas hurriedly explained, No, Commander, you've misunderstood. We took our seats according to the three-dimensional images in the Encyclopedia of Draenor Demons that the higher-ups gave us. After saying that, Thomas kicked the leg of the mage next to him. The guy grunted and hurriedly took out a projection crystal. Immediately, the image and description of the demons appeared on it. It was clear which ones were the terror emissaries and which ones were the commandos. Where did you get this information? Maralad was shocked. Thomas shrugged. You'll have to ask the big shots of the Alliance who are above the rank of Major General. Perhaps Special Envoy Mark Dooku will know. For some reason this person who was destined to be unable to rely on Xueqi due to his lack of talent, thought of the mysterious Mark Dooku again. Now, Mark had somehow become a special envoy of the Alliance. This time, Thomas guessed correctly. The information came from Xueqi. Ever since Xueqi forced the Eridar twins to surrender, all kinds of information had been sent to Karazhan. Chapter 1446. In order to avoid being discovered, the cautious Gemini would of course not give Xueqi any important information. However, they did not feel guilty at all for selling the scum who had surrendered to Illidan. There were so many demons in the twisting nether that there were hundreds of millions of them. Originally, these low-level demons who were not directly under a lord would not be taken seriously, so the Gemini sold them to their heart's content. His background was completely exposed. From their appearance, to their level, to their special skills. God damn it, they had everything. Anyway, if there was anything, they could just say that the Infernal Affairs had stolen the information from 10,000 years ago. After all, demons who could become elites and above basically had a lifespan of more than 10,000 years. Imriel saw that the other side had a smurf boss and an elite. She estimated and frowned. Marad was the only heroic powerhouse on her side who could fight. If they rushed in recklessly, it was very likely that they would suffer heavy casualties. Do we have any reinforcements? At this moment, Imriel's face was no longer as lively as before. It was full of seriousness. After all, she was carrying the lives of more than 1,000 of her compatriots on her shoulders. If she made a mistake in her command, It would be the end of these compatriots. Yes, Marad replied. The higher-ups have prepared artillery support for us from the flying warships. Since they are not directly under the alliance, once we call for reinforcements, once we win, a portion of the merit will be given to them. Imriel seemed very decisive. Compared to the illusory merit and fighting against demons who would not really die, she valued the lives of her compatriots more. At this moment, Xueqi, who was observing Imriel in Karazhan, rubbed his chin with a very playful expression on his face. Master, do you think this little dreamy-eye girl is very promising? Vashj, who was standing beside him, smiled like a flower. Do you want me to help Master teach her a few moves? Help Master cultivate a capable female subordinate. Xueqi rolled his eyes at Vashj, his eyes full of warning. Vashj suddenly stopped talking. Vashj was indeed a capable and good maid. The problem was that this girl was born in the most corrupt High Elven palace, and had been in the deep sea for almost 10,000 years. Many things would become complicated because of her habitual thinking. Xueqi didn't want such a good seedling to be led astray by Vashj. How should he put it? With him, Xueqi, there definitely wouldn't be any king of Draenor. Using his own methods to nurture Imriel, who was supposed to be successful, the sense of accomplishment was no less than building a complete and majestic fortress with his bare hands. Xueqi said, if you're that free, go prepare the second phase of the plan. If you really fail, I'll skin you alive. Yes. I will obey Master's orders. Seeing that Xueqi was in a bad mood, Vashj tactfully lifted her white maid skirt. She did not leave, but stood quietly to the side. Vashj noticed that Vanessa, who was always in the way of her and Xueqi's game of a bite of the tongue, was no longer there. In the Moon Shadow Valley, Imriel's expression was very interesting, because the person who popped out of the magic communication mirror was a Pandaren. Wahahaha. Is this the first time you've seen a Pandaren? We don't live on the main continent of Azeroth, so it's normal for the Draenei who have just joined the Alliance not to have seen us. Alright, enough with the nonsense. Dear Commander Imriel, the Stormwind Special Experimental Unit, Royal Brothel Team, is at your service. At this moment, Hoof spat. Although she knew that those organizations that were officially recognized or subordinate to the Alliance had all kinds of strange names, she did not expect that other than the reliable Highland Warriors team, there would be such unreliable ones. What? Hoof's eyes widened as she stared at the slightly wretched Pandaren in the communication mirror. Sorry. Sir Commander, although our 3 flying warships are all unofficially equipped warships, the name Royal Brothel Team was accidentally mentioned by the great commander, Duke Marcus. We all thought it was very good, so we used it. After a quick and simple explanation from the captain with the strange name of Nicholas June Xueqi, Imriel barely knew the origin of the royal brothel. Since ancient times, in the official literature and records of all the human navies, every warship was described as a female, she. So, every ship was a ship girl. But you have to think about it this way. When you meet these cute girls, do they keep saying that this is your wife and that is your wife all the time? Is that right? Can't their wives be OXX? If you play with these ships alone, then they are your harem. But ships can't be operated by one person. That means you are not the only one playing, so this is a brothel. June Xueqi waved his black bear paw and said loudly, so the great commander Duke Marcus said on the deck of the stupid Queen Ilia that this is the great royal brothel, not an air force that you can come and go as you please. At this moment, Imriel was devastated. She really did not know that humans and Pandaren would have such strange fetishes. In her young heart, a big warning exclamation mark was drawn on the commander of the Alliance whom she had never met, but who gave her an extremely unreliable feeling. At the same time, whether it was Xueqi in Karazhan or Mark Dooku in the Wildhammer Fortress, because of the telepathic synchronization, they both flipped the table in front of them. Bull ****. I said at that time, this is the Royal Air Force, not a brothel that you can come and go as you please. Someone come. When this guy called June Xueqi comes back, give him an oxygen tank and let him swim in a cesspool for an hour. If Xueqi was not the leader of the Alliance, this kind of thing could really be a big deal. The royal family and the royal family were 2 different things. Royal was a title that only Thoradin the Great Arother Empire could use. Of course, after the people below heard that Xueqi had settled multiple queens, they also jokingly called Xueqi the Emperor. If it was not the Emperor, who could settle multiple queens? It was another matter to say that the Royal Air Force of the Storm family was a brothel. Xueqi hated this group of people with big mouths. Of course, Xueqi was definitely not the only one who talked nonsense, but he could only kill the chicken to warn the monkey. In fact, the so-called Royal Brothel team was a special combination of 3 ships, the special experimental flying battleship War-Weary, the stupid Queen Ilya, and the flying battlecruiser Hood. These 3 ships abandoned the traditional multi-story cannons of the Alliance's previous flying battleships and sea battleships. They went from pursuing firepower density to a more modern firing mode, where only the top deck had cannons. Chapter 1447. On one hand, the cutting-edge rotating turrets allowed the warships to carry larger caliber cannons with a wider firing range. The traditional multi-layered cannons could only aim at a pitiful 15 degrees. On the other hand, there were only a few small caliber cannons at the front and rear of the ship. On the other hand, sealing the lower deck was more beneficial to the survival of the crew. The open multi-layered cannons increased the firepower density, but at the same time, it made the warship more fragile. As long as it hit a certain area, it could easily spread the damage to the armory and cause a chain of explosions. In other words, the cannons that were filled with cannons were like a living target for the armory. As the war continued, under Xueqi's special reminder, the Alliance also noticed a situation. Creating the cutting-edge cannons took a short time, but to train a qualified adult soldier, there had to be an adult, and it had to be a well-educated adult. Illiterates could not handle cannons, especially the new cannons with a firing calibration system. Even with the help of the system to calculate the trajectory, there were many times when the system was not accurate, and the cannoneer's experience had to be used to correct it. This time, the new flying warships were used as test subjects. All 3 warships were equipped with unique cannons. War-Weary's sharpshooter system had the Alliance's cutting-edge tactical auxiliary aiming system, which was inclined towards long-range precision attacks. Hood's Glory system was inclined towards continuous firepower and wide-area damage. The specially equipped chain reloading mechanism made the cannons more automatic. And Ilya's Queen's Command system was similar to Xueqi's radar system before he transmigrated. She would scan the entire battlefield repeatedly and collect all kinds of information on the battlefield. She would then link it with War-Weariness and Hood's fire control system, hoping to increase the firepower, accuracy, and even the dodging rate of the warships. As for the performance of these 3 cutting-edge warships, it needed to be tested in actual combat. Bringing them to the main battlefield was something that the Alliance would only do when it was on the verge of destruction. If the conditions were right, a low-intensity battle would be a very suitable experiment. The Drenii would not use cannons to coordinate, because they had never seen it before. Obviously, Iril was an exception. As the first Drenii to follow a certain Dew who went by the alias Mark, Iril could be said to have seen the world. She was well aware of the terrifying power of modern artillery. After looking at the sketch sketched out by the scout and carefully asking about the terrain of that place, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. Imriel gave an order. Thomas, I need your best archers to take the bottles of holy water and shoot them at these points. Retreat immediately after shooting the arrows. The Illidari outpost was actually built on the ruins of a Drenii palace. There were broken tiles everywhere in the ruins, and only a few houses had tiles to cover their heads. As a sentinel to guard the Moon Shadow Valley, there were not many people stationed here. It was purely because there was an energy node here that Illidan had ordered the demons to set up a sentry post here. Not long after, a few arrows were shot into the open space of Illidar's sentry post. The Illidari commandos, who were actually demon guards, revealed puzzled expressions. They weren't very intelligent, so they couldn't understand why an arrow with holy light would be shot into the empty space. Of course, this didn't stop them from reacting quickly. Enemy attack! Mournful shouts in the Abyss Devil language resounded throughout the entire sentry post. Almost all the demons rushed out with weapons in their hands. But there was nothing. Should we give chase? A commando asked the Terror Emissary. The Terror Emissary was a dreadlord that wasn't strong enough, but in a small sentry post like this, the Terror Emissary was already the commander. After spreading out his senses, he still couldn't sense any traces of the enemy. Finally, the Terror Emissary ordered, "Stay alert." As he hadn't directly confronted the Alliance before, he didn't know that at that moment, 12,000 meters away, 3 warships hovering in the air were in an uproar. The coordinates have been transmitted. An aide shouted. The Pandaren captain, Xueqi, waved his large claw. Compare the terrain data, and try to stabilize the hull. Activate the auxiliary correction system. Wind direction. 12. 3 degrees to the east. Level 3 wind. Alright. The calibration balloon has been released. Everyone, listen up. The main cannon will fire in 60 seconds. In a small valley 2 kilometers away from the Illidari outpost, Imriel was extremely nervous. She was wearing a brand new armor, which in theory could protect her body better than her previous leather armor. However, she knew that in front of demons that were stronger than the beast men, her superior grade plate armor was like paper. The only thing they could rely on was the support of the Alliance's cannons. Imriel was very afraid that the enemy would find them and suddenly rush out to engage them in hand-to-hand combat. If that was the case, the Alliance's warships would not be able to open fire under such circumstances. 5 minutes felt as long as 5 centuries. Finally, there seemed to be thunder in the distant sky, and there was a muffled sound. Soon, every single soldier of the Alliance army could hear it even more clearly. It was the scream of death that came from the sky. The huge cannonball at high speed was like a burning meteor, whistling through the sky as it rushed towards the ground. There was no chance for the demons at the Illidari outpost to escape. The violent and terrifying cannonball had already exploded at the outpost. The strong flash meant that the explosion caused by the new gunpowder was ruthlessly and efficiently crushing all living beings within the range of the explosion. It was as if the earth had been punched by the invisible fist of God, and a huge crater similar to that of a meteorite appeared on the ground. Debris and mud splattered in all directions, and the aftermath of the explosion destroyed everything in its path. The demons of the Burning Legion had fire attributes, so the explosion did not cause much damage to them. Originally, they would only receive damage from the impact, but the gunpowder had some Nara's holy light substance, so it was a different story. Instinctively afraid of the holy light, the demons that were not directly hit by the cannonball fled in all directions. At this time, a few terrifying Illidari emissaries stood up from the crater. They cursed in Eridar. "Calm down, idiots! Find the enemy immediately." Their efforts were destined to be in vain. An attack over 12,000 meters away was already terrifying enough, not to mention that the Royal Kiln team was hovering on the other side of the mountain, and the cannonball flew over the top of the mountain in a parabola. There was not a single demon that had a perception of 12 kilometers away. They could at most roughly sense which direction the cannonball was coming from. They also did not know that the cannonball just now was just a test shot. In order to adjust the shooting parameters for the subsequent cannonball. Chapter 1448. Half a minute later, there was an earth-shattering explosion. The energy from the high explosive shells tore the entire Illidari outpost apart, and a few huge chunks of earth the size of hills were blown into the sky. Looking at the demonic limbs and flesh flying in the sky, the Dreenii troops who were lying in ambush 2 kilometers away were completely speechless. Imriel felt the tremors from the ground, and she found herself crying. She could not help but pray in fear and anxiety. Even though the target was the Dreenii's nemesis, she was still very uncomfortable. The continuous bombardment lasted for 3 minutes, and when it stopped, there was only dead silence. Imriel smiled bitterly. "By the way, do we even have a chance to fight?" Merid said firmly. "It is the commander's duty to confirm the results of the battle." Imriel made a decision. "Then let's go. If there are still demons who are not dead, it is our duty to give them the final blow." After saying that, Hoof turned around and gave an order to the army's mages. "Tell the Royal Kiln team to get ready. In 10 minutes, we will need to coordinate with the infantry cannons." Running 2 kilometers in 10 minutes was not considered steep, and it was considered a relatively fast armed march. But Imriel had no choice. At first, she did not dare to let her troops within a kilometer. After all, the new cannons did not hit the enemy for the first time. Instead, a stray bullet took the lives of an entire team of Dreenii infantry. This was not something unusual. When they reached 500 meters away from the outpost, the hill that they saw through the binoculars had been shaved off a few meters. As expected, not all of the evil demons were dead. At a place visible to the naked eye, a rift tore open in the nearby air, and some horrible things rushed out of it impatiently. Winged demons and bewitching succubi. They roared angrily, waving yellow-green demonic flames and powerful magical energy in their hands. Fire! With the first experience, Imriel was more confident in the accuracy of the 3 battleships. After another round of earth-shattering explosions, The Draenei troops, under the leadership of Merid, launched an all-out attack on the remaining demons. In the name of the Holy Light, die, demons. This was one of the few Draenei elites left. Many Draenei were sacrificed when they were escaping from the demon hunters sent by Kill Jaden. Although veterans who could live for more than 5,000 years were not as rare as phoenix feathers and Chelan horns, there weren't many of them either. Mal Lad was one of them. There weren't many of his former comrades left. Those who gathered around him were all elites who had participated in the previous war with the orcs. They stood guard on the bridge outside Shotrath City, facing the terrifying orcs that were 100 times stronger than them without any fear. Even the insufferably arrogant Blackrock clan had once suffered defeat in front of them. This was an army forged from steel. Every single one of them had a will of steel. Under the name of the Holy Light, they were willing to sacrifice their lives for the Holy Light and their comrades at any time. They sang a hymn unique to the Draenei and charged into the center of the dust-filled battlefield, their bodies shining with golden light without turning back. Imriel could have stayed behind, but she chose to merge herself into the vanguard and followed closely behind Mal Lad. She held a short hammer with a shiny purple head in her right hand and a nimble oval-shaped shield in her left. She took a lunge step that was unique to the Draenei's calves and rushed towards the enemy. In the midst of the dust, she saw a satyr struggling on the ground. Although it was heavily injured, with one of its left legs missing in the bombardment, it still fiercely used its claws to tear off the entire left arm of a Draenei warrior. Oh! The male Draenei warrior screamed in pain and launched a counterattack against the satyr, but was blocked by a claw. The result of countless combat training was that Imriel's movements would not change at all. She kicked hard and flew forward like an arrow. Seeing the opportunity, she swung her warhammer mercilessly towards the satyr's head. At that most appropriate moment, the seal of command exploded, causing Imriel's hammer strike to have additional holy damage. Ah! Imriel was desperate. At that moment, she really did not think about the consequences if she did not hit the satyr. In fact, she almost missed. The satyr tilted his head at the moment when his head was about to be hit. If she had not subconsciously tilted her hammer, the hammer would have probably brushed past the satyr's ear by a few millimeters. Fortunately, with that tilt, she felt as if she had hit something heavy. In the eyes of this Karabeir apprentice who had never been on the battlefield, a quarter of the satyr's ferocious face was blown away. The scene of flesh and blood splattering and the scene of brains splattering was probably something she would not forget for a long time. Strangely, she had never heard that some warriors would feel nauseous after their first kill. She was somewhat calm, and even a little excited. I did it! I really did it! I have passed judgment on those fallen ones who persecuted my people. Hoof screamed in her heart. Her nimble eyes darted around and immediately caught a glimpse of another demonic guard who was trying to kill a human swordsman not far away. Without hesitation, sanction flew out of her hand. The holy energy flowed along her hand and directly hit the demon's brain, causing it to be paralyzed for a short 3 seconds. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, the human swordsman roared and swung the giant sword in his hand, chopping off the head of the burly demon that was half a body taller than him. In the Wildhammer Fortress, the big shots who saw this scene through the magic surveillance screen were amazed. Bulang said, "Not bad, this little hoof. If not for her inexperience at the beginning, I would not have been able to confirm that this was her first time on the battlefield." Kudrin took a sip of liquor. This talent does not seem to be any worse than Abendis back then. As a new recruit, this was already a very high evaluation. Marshal Abendis was never known for his strength. That was because he had the 5 silver saints above him. There were too many top-notch people, so he was forced to be rated as a second-rate knight. Kudrin's evaluation of Imriel was not low. Duque smiled faintly. The better Imriel performed, the more it proved that his foresight was unique. In his mind, Hoof was an important healer knight in the hero squad in the future. Of course, if he could develop her commanding talent, that would be even better. To be honest, before today, he really did not think that she would have this bit of talent in coordination with the infantry. Chapter 1449. Now, Duque had seen everything he wanted to see. He was very satisfied with the results of Imriel's first battle. He was not interested in watching the rest of the battle. After all, this kind of low-level hand-to-hand combat was like chickens pecking at each other. You peck me, I'll peck you back. Moreover, the ones fighting were paladins. It would be strange if it was exciting. He remembered that before he transmigrated, There was a paladin in milk armor and a commandment priest who had a flag in a duel. After fighting for 10 minutes, they found out that their health and mana bars were basically full. They did not even lose half of their health, let alone kill each other. In the end, the two idiots decided the winner by throwing dice. Well, one of them was Xueqi's priest. Of course, Xueqi's priest also had the reputation of the king of duels in Mindful Port. Whoever dueled with Xueqi's priest on the dock, the righteous and kind duel would control the opponent's mind and throw them into the water. Then, he would use the righteous holy magic to shamelessly. Oh no, it would be the righteous iron fist of light. Anyway, if the opponent wanted to swim ashore, they would be out of the duel circle, and the system would declare Xueqi the winner. Xueqi could even sit on the boat and anger the opponent half to death because he would have to wait one more lap for the boat to cross the sea. In the end, Xueqi's notoriety spread far and wide, and no one was willing to duel with him in Mindful Port. Xueqi's attention was no longer on the monitor. Instead, he turned his attention to the documents. Although he was hiding in Karazhan, as long as he still had the title of the Alliance Commander, he had to deal with a lot of chores. As long as he did not go missing, these kinds of trivial matters would come to him. After all, no leader in the Alliance had the ability to deal with hundreds of documents at the same time like Xueqi, and whether it was applications or opinions, he would never make a mistake. As an engineering student, Xueqi's major was decathlon, and he wasn't proficient in any of them. From boilers to automation, from power distribution to engineering budgets, there was everything. Thanks to the overbearing system elf, all the knowledge that Xueqi had read in the past, even the knowledge that he thought he had forgotten, was dug up by the system from a dusty corner and applied to it. Sigh. I can't help it. Who told me to have such a useless host? The system elf complained from time to time. Shut up. Xueqi rolled his eyes. With the help of the system, Xueqi alone was equivalent to a logistics department of 300 people. In addition, many things had to be approved by the Supreme Commander, so this ability was even more precious. Before Xueqi appeared, logistics was a black hole. Not to mention the so-called logistics of the old tribes, where they could eat wherever they went, that was a typical example of living off the mountains, living off the rivers and living off the soil. In any case, locusts were like locusts, eating whatever they could get their hands on. Once they encountered a barren area, they would be finished before the enemy even attacked. No one could manage the logistics on the Alliance's side, and no one could manage it. According to the feudal system, the management of garbage warehouses, and the calculation method that didn't even have Arabic numerals, the king himself didn't even know how much food could be transported to the battlefield. There were even cases of logistics personnel embezzling food and selling it to the merchants who accompanied the army. Then, the merchants added a discount on the price and sold it to the king. The merchants were even rewarded by the king. After Xueqi came to power, especially after magic communication was popularized, logistics was no longer a lucrative job. First of all military supplies were standardized. During research and development, he could let the dwarves let their imaginations run wild. Once production was decided, there would be at most 2 common versions of the same type of equipment and 1 backup version. Only these 3 versions had production lines. Nothing else was made. It was like a German mechanized infantry division in World War II on Earth that had more than 10 types of armored vehicles, or a certain Japanese machine gun that used clips to feed bullets. Xueqi scoffed at such a stupid idea. Only by standardizing and reducing the variety could the logistics burden be minimized. Next was a more scientific method of calculation. Entry and exit were all calculated, and it required the signatures or seals of the warehouse manager, the supervisor, and the person who extracted it. If one signature was missing, only the other 2 would be needed. Next was dry storage. Who didn't know how to do that? Yes, the Alliance sent clear instructions to teach the people how to choose warehouses, where to dig holes, how to dry and ventilate, how to prevent rain and moisture during transportation. Finally was the research and development of new weapons. With the development of technology, there were always some things that were awesome when they first came out, but were immediately destroyed when the opponent was changed. For example, in the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance's FFF Regiment Flamethrower still had many orcs waking up in the middle of the night. They even shouted, "FFF Regiment is here," and there was a tragic scene of old orcs collectively exploding into a frenzy. Now that the war was advancing, when the Alliance took down Hellfire Fortress, the once invincible flamethrower in group battles, urban battles, and whatnot suddenly became useless. Who would be the one to destroy a Naga that played with water? Hellfire, which relied on fire to survive, was going to use fire to spray it? What a joke! These days, there weren't many demons that were afraid of fire. As a result, the flamethrowers suddenly went from being the MVP of regular battles to being marginalized. But with a single order from Duke and a simple modification blueprint, the flamethrower, who had almost become a passerby, became a celebrity that was loved by everyone and blossomed with flowers. Demon! Drink the water that washes your feet. The domineering shout made everyone tremble. Golden water droplets fell from the sky. Colorless and odorless, but full of a holy aura. The Dreenii who were in the middle of a bloody battle were all shocked, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. That's right, what was sprayed was naturally holy water, from the holy light creature, Naru, washes their feet. The nature of the flamethrower was to spray liquid fuel further using hydraulic pressure. Anyway, spraying fuel was the same. Spraying holy light washes was also the same. As long as the igniter on the nozzle was removed, it would be over. The Alliance's flamethrower, the second spring, was that simple and violent. This thing could even be used by new soldiers who had trained for half a day. But the effect of using it was surprisingly good. Originally, when playing with a flamethrower, one had to pay attention to position and wind direction. If a moron sprayed upwind, that would be a classic example of playing with fire and getting burned. But spraying holy water was basically harmless to the Alliance soldiers. Only a small portion of the Forsaken would be hit. As long as they weren't afraid of wasting it, they could use it as a water festival. When the human body came into contact with holy water, it would naturally disinfect and heal wounds. Demons that touched this thing were in trouble. It was like acid-level stuff. Many demons that didn't die under the bombardment of heavy artillery fell to the ground screaming and dying when they touched the holy water. The Dreenii guards swarmed up and greeted them with their holy light warhammers. Chapter 1450. There was no such thing as a single weapon that could win a large-scale war. It was not just about manpower and resources, but also the research and development of weapons and equipment. Since ancient times, it had always been the case that the overall strength of a nation determined the outcome of a battle. To be able to produce weapons that could restrain the enemy's main force within a certain period of time was already something worth celebrating. Battles between soldiers would obviously end with the victory of the Allies, but battles between the strong would be a different story. The people of Eridar, who worshipped evil powers, and the people of Dreenii, who worshipped the holy light, had been in love and killing each other for 25,000 years. Both had their own ways of dealing with the other. Low-concentration holy water could bully low-level demons, and it had a certain effect on mid-level demons, but it was a different story for high-level demons. Everything else aside, just the high-order demon's black protective shield that was as faint as a fog was enough to keep any holy water from entering. It was more like two opposing energies canceling each other out. After a few heavily injured Illidari emissaries were smashed to death by Marid's hammer, the enemy's manager finally appeared, Dreadlord Lotharis. Other than the few at the top of the rankings, the Dreadlord had become a synonym for a boss. Duque stood at the top, so of course he could say that it was a fight between weaklings. But the reason why the Dreadlord could be crowned with the title of Dreadlord was because he was an existence that could not be dealt with by normal soldiers and beginner professions. Humph! With a cold snort, the Dreadlord's signature, rotten stink bug swarm, directly caused the dozens of holy knights within 100 meters to choke on their throats, causing them to fall to the ground in pain. Out of the way! The muscular man, Marid, roared as he waved his war hammer, which was shining with a golden radiance, and engaged in a fierce battle with Rosiris. There was more than one Lotharis on the sentry side. A demon with the appearance of a succubus appeared. She waved her evil long whip, wrapping it around the necks of the Dreenii warriors, cruelly killing them. If it was a pure succubus, she might have charmed the allied warriors, causing them to die in a humiliating manner. But she was not. She was the Queen of Pain, Gabrisa. An evil existence that took pleasure in torturing others. Demon! Your opponent is me. Mustering up his courage, Iril used the shield to protect his body with his left hand and lowered his right arm so that his arm was in a position where he could exert force at any time. Once he caught hold of the enemy's weakness, he would definitely swing his warhammer in a circle. Oh he. A young and beautiful hoof. Do you want Big Sister to tell you how to change from a little hussy to a coquettish hussy? The evil Jabrissa extended her purplish-red snake head and licked the end of the whip. Her coquettish demeanor sent a chill down Imriel's spine. Death is the only end for you, Imriel shouted. Regardless of whether it was real or not, it could at least scare people, and Jabrisa made such a declaration. Heh! I, your sister, am an existence that will never die. Then, a strange sound echoed on the battlefield. Damn it! Oh. This strange sound naturally attracted the attention of Xueqi, who was approving documents in the Karazhanli office. F***CK. Xueqi was shocked. What did he see? A hoof that was being teased by a female demon. The thorny whip dodged Hoof's shield at an unbelievable angle, drawing an arc in the air and easily shattering Hoof's excellent-grade armor. What was supposed to be a flawless set of heavy armor that covered the entire body, with the exception of the occasional exposed neck, was actually beaten up by Jabrisa into a set of female armor from some Korean games before he transmigrated. Well, it was the kind of armor that had pauldrons and leggings, but the crucial parts were only left with 3 points. Only after looking did he realize that the Hoof's unique perky buttocks, coupled with the tattered clothes that looked like they had been raped countless times in a certain game. It was really cool. Her hoof did not just take a beating, and just as she was frowning under the unbearable pain of soreness and numbness, she finally struck back. Reckoning. In this era, it was a Holy Knight's most powerful counterattack. After a Holy Knight suffered a fatal blow, he would gain an additional chance to attack. If it was an ordinary Holy Knight, the upper limit could be stacked 4 times, but the better the endurance and the purer the Holy Light, the more times the Holy Knight could stack. In other words, you could beat up a Holy Knight, but the Holy Knight could use the Holy Light to record your deeds like a little black book, and then settle the score all at once. Now, Imriel was using such a tactic. But it seemed to be used in a wrong way. In a flash, Imriel had swung her hammer at least a dozen times, but when she hit it, it seemed to have the special effect of a whip. Crack, crack, crack. The Queen of Pain seemed to have suffered a dozen whips, not a dozen hammers. Jabrisa's tears flowed, her arms hugging each other like she was hugging herself, her legs closed, then her body convulsed, and she started moaning crazily. What the hell? What the hell is this? Is she playing hardcore games on the battlefield? Should I say, as expected of a demon? Imriel was stunned and stood rooted to the ground. Xueqi was also speechless. It was not impossible to let go and let the hoof grow, but he could not let the hoof lead him astray. Xueqi had almost destroyed a high priest in the ancient war. He could not let his future archbishop be destroyed as well. He could not tolerate this. Just as the Queen of Pain took advantage of the moment when the hoof was stunned and sent it flying with a whip, a portal suddenly appeared in the center of the battlefield. A young mage wearing a magic robe slowly walked out from the door. Who is it? I'm having fun. Get out of here. Jabrisa shook her hand, and the already sharp whip now revealed its true destructive power. Just the middle part of the whip lightly touched the ground, and the hard sandstone instantly exploded into thousands of pieces. The power of the middle part was already shocking, not to mention the end part that gathered all the evil power. The young mage did not even have time to activate Ice Barrier, and was about to be torn into pieces by the whip, but as if the space was strangely distorted, Jabrisa's bewitching face suddenly became asymmetrical. The left side of her nose was suddenly aimed at the red right side of her lips. At this moment, Imriel, who was struggling to get up, realized that a line of blood had appeared in the middle of Jabrisa's body. This line had perfectly cut the Queen of Pain in half. It was as if time had stopped at this moment. The female demon, who was full of pride just now, still had a horrified expression on her face. She let out a shrill scream of her soul. Impossible! Amidst the mist of blood, everyone, including Imriel, who was nearby, and the Drenii garrison officer who was watching the battle nervously from afar, saw the female demon, who had been acting fierce just now, split in half. She could not be more dead.